Okay, we are live, 7/20/2024. This is the 55th anniversary of one of the greatest hoaxes of all time, which is the moon landing. And one of the reasons I don't vote is I'm not going to entrust people to be my leaders if they fall for such an obvious ruse. And all the presidents, as far as I know, have been true believers in moon landings, which is a ludicrous belief. And was it Voltaire who said those can get you to believe absurdities, can get you to commit atrocities? I think that's true. And I feel like many of us are entitled to monetary compensation for the mental anguish inflicted upon us by NASA. I know people who can't sleep at night without their space junk helmets. They're afraid of being craniumed in their sleep. And that's a valid fear. It's a real threat. There's a family in Florida that nearly died because a piece of space junk hit their house. And they traced it to a 2.9-ton pallet of batteries dropped on 3/11/2021. And back then I said, this is portentous. It's on the anniversary of the pandemic. And it's a big chunk of space junk, the biggest one ever. It's foreshadowing. And it's true. We have witnessed, and the predictive programming continually bears out results. The predictive programming does have an effect of preparing people to believe unbelievable things. They insert into the realm of possibilities things that have no business there. And they just are taken for granted and become what we call hyperstitions. Phones are open, 505-510-4226. That's the permanent number, and it's the voicemail number. We are done with Blog Talk Radio. They had gremlins chewing on the wires, couldn't get any calls on most of the nights where it's most important. And maybe it was just a coincidence, but it seemed like as soon as we started talking about the Trump hoaxination or hoax assassination thing, this WWE magic trick PR stunt, phones got shut down. And so we're no longer paying for that. All right, we're joined by Let's Go, Jay Diggs, Osher, Roxy W, Frank Murr exploring again, Jennifer Reeves, Diana South says happy Saturnday. Mango Penguins, Ted Striker 2112, Ashy Dog. 3 up, 3 down says Neil A is alien backwards. Yeah, does anyone know how much NASA paid Neil Armstrong to go to the moon? They get compensated for travel, but Neil Armstrong was paid to go to the moon. And wasn't Buzz Aldrin's mother's maiden name Moon, like Marilyn Moon? So fake. And Super Recognizer thinks, and this is a YouTube channel, he thinks that Neil Armstrong is literally Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space who died a mysterious death, that he was kind of rebranded, given a new face. They barely changed it. So Neil Armstrong, based on his salary and a 40-hour work week, he would have been paid roughly $33 for his time on the moon. Accounting for inflation, in 2019 dollars, it would have been $230. So NASA got a bargain considering the giant history-making risk Armstrong was taking. And by the way, today's also the 55th anniversary of Neil Armstrong taking the Holy Communion on the moon. Yeah, I recently came across this information because Candace Owens was saying that NASA is run by Satanists. And well, that's kind of weird because Neil Armstrong, and this was information that they tried to kind of bury, but he took communion wine and bread on the surface of the moon. So this is July 20th, 1969. Before Armstrong and Aldrin stepped out of the lunar module, oh, it was Aldrin. It was Aldrin who did it. Drinking some wine. We call him buzzed because, well, some of his statements. Aldrin unstowed a small plastic container of wine and some bread. He brought them to the moon from the church where he was an elder. And I think it's called like the Church of the Moon. It's some weird, strange NASA culty church. It's like NASAtology or something. But it says here, I would like to request a few moments of silence. In his book, Magnificent Desolation, he shares this message. And he said, it says here, he then ate and drank the elements. The surreal ceremony is described in an article in 1970, quote, I poured the wine into the chalice our church had given me. Now I'm curious about pouring wine into a chalice on the moon. Does the wine float around? And how did you drink it? Through your fishbowl on your head. In the 1/6 gravity of the moon, the wine curled slowly and gracefully up the side of the cup. It was interesting to think that the very first liquid ever poured on the moon and the first food eaten there were communion elements. He also read from the Gospel of John. During it all, Armstrong, a deist, is said to have watched respectfully but without making any comment. Yeah, I'm curious how he got the communion bread and the wine through the fishbowl. Very curious. Very consistent with what we've been describing, how I've been saying for some time, that NASAtology is really just Mystery Babylon, same old rituals and rites, but dressed up like science fiction. And I think that's an indication I'm correct about this. Well, let's see who else has joined us. Gematria 101 says, oh yeah, by the way, Dinah South got it, $33. Just a clue here. This is just a spoiler, kind of. Whenever I give a pop quiz, the answer is 33. Gematria 101 says, yesterday was the 201st day of the year because it's a leap year. Biggest financial computer shutdown. FedNow currency was released on 201st day too. So what he means here is the number 201 has special significance. Event 201 was I guess you would call it a tabletop exercise that preceded the world being shut down. And we're getting ready for the Leave the World Behind global internet shutdown event, which I'm looking forward to. I've got a ton of books here I got to catch up on. But when that happens, it's going to involve a lockdown, both physically and of the internet to stop the flow of mind viruses. That's one of the narrative threads we've been following here. But the 201 is highly significant here. Tominoid 3 says, Angel Has Fallen is about a drone assassination attempt on the president, Trumbull Morgan Freeman, and they blame Butler actor who is head of Secret Service. Very interesting. So the name's Trumbull. And by the way, you said drone assassination. Trump gunman flew a drone over rally site hours before the attempted assassination. Joined by Messianic Charlatan, Shannon Jones. I get a lot of good tips, by the way, via email. And you can email me, or you can leave voicemails. You can text me at the number 505-510-4226. Wherever you want to send messages, I do get it. I have to catch up. I have a lot of good leads. A lot of them come from Discord and Gilded and Twitter and others come from direct email like Messianic Charlatan and others. So I appreciate it. Keep the puzzle pieces flowing. It's a multi-million piece puzzle because the news media is fundamentally a reality wood chipper. And so we have to kind of put it back together. Mango says, still no Wi-Fi, no cable. I can stream Netflix though. Been watching Vikings Valhalla, enjoying it. Yeah, Netflix is a sort of a scrying mirror. If you want to know what the future is going to hold and you don't feel like watching the news, you can read the zeitgeist and get the news in a more entertaining fashion by watching Netflix. And this is very consistent if you look at its origin story. Edward Bernays, master of propaganda, manipulating the masses with PR stunts. He invented PR stunts. Combine that with the powers of Sigmund Freud because they're all related. So you mix it all, and what do you get? They have figured out how you operate beneath the hood, subconsciously. They manipulate the mass mind, the individual mind, and right now they know everything about you because Zuckerberg, Data, again, he looks like Star Trek's Data, sold all of your DMs and browser history to Netflix. What do you think they're going to do with that? All right, joined by Pocahontas FTW says, same thing happened to the 87 Challenger flight crew. They all have stories and new identities. It was 86, and it was the 1 minute and 13-second mark where it blew up. The Columbia explosion was the 113th shuttle explosion. All kinds of 113, the One World Trade Tower that replaced the twins, opened on 11/3. 11/3 was a significant date in 2020, the election. But yeah, these are all fake. And not only that, but you can go back and see, the Apollo 1, the incineration thing. And these are what I consider to be foundational sacrifices. And there's a reason why I say so, and it has to do with this consistent theme of before every major advance forward, there's some kind of immolation. So first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, fiery death, mysterious death. They couldn't find his pieces like Osiris. And again, you find all these themes that connect it to their mythos, which is essentially sun worship, but it's dressed up like science fiction. Again, this is the world state church of nasatology that we're all talking about. Then you have the Apollo 1 disaster where the 3 individuals incinerate. 19 years later, Challenger explosion. And this is the anniversary date of Sir Francis Drake, so there's a very specific reason they choose these dates. But moving forward, I had kind of suggested that since at every major leap forward, going into space, mastering low Earth orbit, now we're about to colonize. It seems like at every major step, there's some kind of disaster. And I think the next big disaster is likely going to be the ISS. And once they've brought that down, then we move into the next phase. That's my take on it. And I think somehow, this is obviously a Kubrick production. Stanley Kubrick didn't just fake Apollo 11. He's one of the great metascriptors. And that whole department he was a part of wrote the 20th and 21st century. And we're still living it. We're living in a movie. Or you should rather, a movie augmented reality. And this isn't hard to understand if you compare it to how religions augment realities. Only our religion is coming from the screen. And by religion, I mean the term to describe world view, a regulated one that is decided by an authority that people trust and have faith in. Okay, is today Saturday or Sunday? We says it's Sunday. There's no way I totally am off that bad. Is it really? Well, somebody fill me in. I feel Mandela affected. What day is it? Okay, no, it's Saturday in Illinois. Okay, it's probably Saturday where I am. Thank you. Oh, and in 3 days, we're doing the ISS viewing, which is going to be a big deal, so you don't want to miss it. Linda Curtis says, tabletop exercise is them playing a game with the population. Yes, think of it like this. If you look at Westworld, you have the programmers around a circular table, which represents the world, where the synths are, the manipulated, the programmed. Same thing you see in Clash of the Titans, the gods gather around the table. Same thing you see in a number of movies. Westworld has the same kind of fixture. And this is like the Truman Show. We live in a Truman Show. The Truman Show is in your mind, though. It's the false world view. But To say that the news is fake is not to say that reality does not exist. And that's one of the guardrails or one of the misdirection lines is where people start to see through the media fakery and they start to question, am I seeing through the matrix? I've caught up on all this stuff. I guess I've hacked the matrix and I'm seeing how reality works. And I think that's erroneous. And it's one of the things I want to address today. I wrote an article, I just published it. It's called Don't Go Down with the Sinking Ship, spelled Synching. Synchromysticism is a conspiracy theorist trap. And this is something we've been discussing lately, and I think it's time to just bring it up and make the position very clear, what is being posited here and what the better explanation is. So we'll go over this today as well. Josh Lebsock says auto hoax or GTFO. Yeah, I would say so. I would recommend why not, why would you want to hang out with a bunch of people who don't believe that the news is real and that anything we're told to fear is worth fearing? You'll be cowering beneath your desk, ducking and covering when you see the mushroom cloud on the screen, and we won't be. You're the only one scared in the room. And I've caught flack for this. Like, oh, you're not concerned, you're not worried. And I've just kind of endured it. And I'm like, they have this mentality, truthers do, and wokesters do. Like, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And I would argue that if you don't have peace of mind, then you're programmed. I mean, the outrage is a form of virtue signaling, perhaps. Like, we got to wake the sheep, we got to evangelize. And I suggest that we don't evangelize. Like, I am not interested in, quote, waking up Normieville. I have nothing to do with Woketown. Trutherville is mostly hooked on hopium, and they're starving, just breadcrumbs here and there, and it's just awash with guardrails and limited hangout operations. It's a total wreck, but it's salvageable. There's some parts that are salvageable, and that's what we're working on here. And one of the perennial flaws has been the false flag theory, where they see an event, they're like, well, it looks real, so let's go with it. But the story doesn't add up. It must be a false flag, a second shooter. So now you have Trutherville running laps around a water tower, wondering who pierced Trump's ear. And again, most of us, I think we all agree that the shooter was probably a flat earther. They're going to come up with that because they've been aiming at flat earthers for some time. We've been waiting for the flat earth terrorist, and here they have an excuse. Like, yeah, he didn't account for the rotation of the earth. That's why he missed. But while they're chasing second shooter theories, we're way past that. We're examining the news bent reality, the way they write history in advance and implement it through controlled media. I mean, we have been taken over. The human race has been conquered. We have been put into a one world religion, and it pre-exists most of us here. Jay Digg says, I think the full moon's going to make the ISS viewing difficult. It's also hard to see things that aren't there. Even if you had a spotlight, good luck seeing Bigfoot. But we're going to try. No excuses. And if you don't see it, you can blame the moon if you want. Okay, Wee says, I think we are all gods. That's a disturbing thought. I mean, lowercase g, I guess, but I would need evidence. Like, show me your God power. Manifest something. So many people say, I manifest my reality. Well, let's see. Demonstrate. It's easy to take credit for things, but then not take credit for other things, and it becomes a matter of almost a bias. And synchronicity, meaningful coincidences exist, sure. But when it comes to examining the news, I really want to break away from the habit of ascribing some kind of magical or synchronistic occurrence to explain really mundane things. Yeah, I'll put a link to the intro song in the chat. Absolutely. Phones are open, by the way, 505-510-4226. If you're a god, call in. We'll talk to gods. I'm the god blocker, apparently. I'm also the AI god blocker. And now I'm blocking synchromysticism and chemtrails. But this is by design. We've been talking about this all year. Our objective is to quarantine the think tank and have it define itself by what it's not. We're skeptics. We're non-believers. We're agnostics. We don't know these things to be true because there's not enough information. So we're not just going to take it on faith and believe it. We're on the other side of the screen. But in order to consolidate our numbers, we need to salvage those from Trutherville who can be salvaged. So we draw attention to the guardrails that keep them within that mental paddock. And I had someone who formerly believed in chemtrails contact me and say, hey, I'm no longer wasting bandwidth on that paranoid delusion. Thank you. We says, sorry, gods becoming is a better term. That we're becoming gods? That's interesting. Becoming gods. Like that we are evolving or something. That's kind of the idea behind the Church Universal Triumphant that I was talking about yesterday. The Ascended Masters. The idea that some people decide that when they die, they're going to stay behind and help people into the higher realms instead of just leaving. Like basically holding a hand down and you can channel them. But I'm not much of a New Ager these days. And this is why I'm confronting synchromysticism. I think that it has opened the door to muddying the waters and disguising what is real. And ultimately, this is about real versus fake. We were born into fake. There's no reason to defend it. Fake dead kids' lives don't matter. No reason to run around with theatrical blood on your hands. Nobody died. Nobody cried. These aren't challenging propositions. These are true. So let's start with this. Don't go down with the sinking ship. William Blake said, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. What is synchromysticism? It's a branch of conspiracy theory-based media analysis that posits predictive programming couldn't be scripted by man and must be the result of something more. So they take the evidence of psychological operations, perception management operations, as prophetic clues from a higher power. And we talk about many examples. So for the recent one, in fact, the mainstream media is noting one of these. There's an article I saw today about Season 4, Episode 8 of The Boys, which has a Trump-like character survive an assassination attempt. And you see him in the photos, we talked about it, where he has a bloody face. And I'm like, wait a minute here. This is exactly like what we just saw with Trump. And there's a article I saw in the mainstream today, and I'll pull this up. He's called The Homelander. And it said, the Boys Season 4 Finale Review, Homelander's trump card seals the deal in glory. Yes, Homelander Boys is supposed to be Donald Trump. Apparently the actor doesn't love it. Amazon series, now check this out. Amazon series The Boys adds disclaimer to the season finale after Trump assassination attempt. The title of the episode, previously called Assassination Run, was changed. We already talked about this. We've gone through the litany of predictive programming. Captain America, The Boys, A Man in Full, Fallout, all these different examples. And these are not mere coincidences. And in that regard, synchromystics are right. They'll say, oh, it can't be a coincidence. No, it's not. It's scripted by human beings. So here you have an example, though, that no, we're not jumping to conclusions. We're not reaching. We're not grasping at straws. Even the mainstream media is noting this. The Boys Season 4 finale makes a big change after the Trump assassination attempt. They put a warning on it. They put a trigger warning following the Trump shooting because of the similarities between this and the recent Trump shooting. How many here think this is a synchronicity from the universe, like God winking at us? How many of you ascribe divine authorship to the MSM? Because I don't. Taking out my Occam's razor, I have to ask, what's more likely, cryptic messages from God or propaganda messaging from the government? To answer this, we have to just simply look at the predictive programming that is part of a collective mediation process embedded into all media, entertainment, news, and otherwise. And what's more, the messaging leads to fake news events with political messaging and agendas attached. For example, here, this one we're talking about, this predictive programming was followed up with something fake. And shout out to Jurassic Liars. This was season 4, episode 8, and he has brought up how the Trump shooting has the 4-8 or 8-4 code all over it. False flag theory is another truth or trap that I've written about and discussed at length. And this is the one that assumes the basic reality of news reportage, but they add on second shooters. So the false flaggers are running around the water tower theory. They're looking for alternative explanations for events that are assumed to have occurred. And what false flag theory does, and why I'm a critic of it, is it distracts the observer from media fakery. Instead, it presents them with a whodunit, alternative culprit, a Scooby-Doo mystery to solve. So they say, who did it? Instead of asking, did it even happen? And predictive programming, like you just saw, is not an example of an eerie coincidence, as the media calls it, nor is it synchronicity or revelation of the method. The directors here weren't inspired to produce something that would magically correspond with the future event. So this is the final guardrail. And if you can see past this incorrect explanation for these coincidental alignments between entertainment and future news events, you will have insight into the inner workings of the PSYOP entertainment complex. There's no doubt here that we have cracked their code and we have deciphered the method behind news bending. Predictive programming is world government propaganda repeating messages to the collective psyche in anticipation of future social changes by preparing them for incoming transformative psychological operations. So they have some big pill for you to swallow. They want you to have a lot already in your psyche. They want you to be subconsciously programmed. They want you to be susceptible and suggestive to it when it happens. And they want to insert things that aren't possible into the realm of your possibility, which is easy to do when they frame your reality. And as long as you're programmed, they do. They don't mind. Now, I suspect, and this is another point too, first, the evidence for media fakery and scripting, as we describe it, far outweighs synchromysticism and false flag explanations. I mean, we have receipts. And I suspect that the synchromysticism movement may have good intentions, but I think it's disinformation to hide the programmers and the program. And there is a program. They do write our history in advance. And again, if you find that hard to accept because the news on the ground is so complex and there's a wide array of events, look at the space program and ask yourself, is that totally scripted A to Z from Apollo 1 to the ISS? Absolutely. So the synchromysticism has people looking under rocks for supercomputers and gods, and like false flag theory, and this is another major criticism, it gives the programmers plausible deniability. So I don't think someone should get away with this claim that a higher power or supercomputer is involved without identifying it. Who is the god of predictive programming? What is the force behind it? Now, I want to point out one thing about the creative process, because creativity is intrinsically about manufacturing meaningful coincidences, that is, synchronicity in real time, encoding meaning into art. But subjective experiences of meaning have zero to do with propaganda analysis. So I just want to do away with the confusion and the uncertainty, and that's part of the weapon against us. Like, I'm not confused. I don't watch the news and wonder, is there a mysterious supercomputer manipulating events that resulted in a train derailment imitating a movie that just preceded it? No, I don't have that confusion. I know the cause. This is what I mean by wiping clean the doors of perception, the William Blake quote. Stepping on the other side of the screen, rejecting the MSM premise. So why add a something more on top of the metascript? Why add a supercomputer? I don't know why many people have that. A lot of people have that impulse. They'll say, there's no way man could have done all this. So what is this exactly? Are they doing damage control? Hiding the programmers? That's what I think. I think it's meant to hide the program. I think the synchromystic explanation is dead as the Mandela effect. And I've said this before. It's dead as an explanation. You can't argue synchromysticism explains what we're talking about, the coincidental alignments between entertainment events and world stage actors and what happens in the news. How do you think we were able to look at Robert De Niro outside of Trump's trial and extrapolate from that a speech from a movie 14 years ago he was in that represented Trump at the moment of assassination? Even right now, Trump is talking about how the anti-immigration sign saved his life because he was gesturing at this chart. And just like in the movie, Robert De Niro playing this xenophobic senator is making the same statements when he gets shot. My point of it is, we only found this because we understand the structure. We were looking for it. We're like, okay, this is the structure. Let's look at Robert De Niro in relation to the Trump shooting. And we found abundant connections. And we're not grasping at straws. These are targeted messages. And the interesting thing to me about this De Niro thing was a couple things. One, the character preceded the existence of Trump as politician. And two, De Niro was the presidential assassin in the Taxi Driver movie, where he literally inspired the assassin that shot Reagan and Brady. And the whole JL talked about this last night. The whole thing about James Brady dying is that it says here he was eventually stabilized and lived 33 years before dying. So 33 years after being shot, his death was ruled a homicide. The shooting was on a 3:30, but his death was on an 8:4. Again, 8:448, like I mentioned a moment ago. And that code in connection with assassins and the president being shot. So I'm prepared to make the case, shift the burden of proof, and get someone to tell me which God is doing it. Because at this point, synchromysticism is a religious movement. If it's going to mystify the TV as a Bible, if you're going to argue for the divine authorship or divine inspiration of big movies, yeah, that's a leap in the direction of religiosity. Now, moving on here is a few more points. To claim there's some third party involved in scripting the news is misdirection and it's discredited. And if someone's going to claim predictive programming is the work of angels or something, or Bigfoot or gremlins or supercomputers, well, first of all, it falls short of explaining the phenomenon. And by explaining, I mean we can predict it. Can you predict when the next synchronistic event's going to happen? No. But we predict predictive programming all the time. We're like, look, this movie here is going to have it. Leave the World Behind's come in, watch. The news is going to follow this. And we've been vindicated time and again. We've been doing this for years. So I'm suggesting, again, that the mystic explanation is damage control. And it's to keep truthers from figuring out that the media is fake while replacing it with this notion that they have seen through the matrix and they're seeing evidence of simulation. There are no synchronicities on the world stage, only scripted events that appear to be such. This is not only axiomatic, but it's fundamental. Every instance of predictive programming has coincidental alignment, but these are man-made. And here's another important point, because the proponents of synchromysticism will bring you this false dichotomy. They'll say, coincidence versus synchronicity. No way it's coincidence, that's crazy. But there's a third possibility, and this is the only one supported by evidence, that predictive programming is deliberately inserted into media with intent by propagandists. Now, I have probably a few more pages on this one. I mean, it's kind of a long article, and I think I explained the gist of it, but mainly it's this. As an explanation, it falls short of explaining what we're seeing. And we have an explanation that is backed by evidence. And what it suggests, human-controlled, meta-scripted, news-bent reality. False explanations like Mandela effects and synchromysticism are a waste of time, and I think it's inadequate, and we're moving past it. Okay, let me catch up on your comments. Oh yes, phones are open if anyone wants to call in, and you can leave voicemails. I'll go ahead and start checking voicemails, and we'll play those usually probably at the beginning. We used to get plenty of people who would leave voicemails who can't call. Okay, I'm looking here. I think I got one here.
Oh my God, look at him blonde. All right. I'm not even chasing them. They're all with fucking ballers. So we're going to get that blue cow. No.
Okay, that sounds like a pocket dial. Next one.
I love it. He just got his gun shot.
Okay, I think it's the same one. Okay, next one.
Nice that you put your video up on Creaky's site, considering it was all BS. Do flat earthers all do the same thing? I really wonder about that. Does anybody have any education whatsoever? I really wonder about the flat earthers. They all have come to conclusions based on no information, no education, no nothing. There's just nothing there. Nothing is done to validate what they're talking about. They use rambling garbage. Unbelievable.
All right. Appreciate your opinion. But I would argue that flat earthers are all educated about the globe. It's mandatory. You know, the thing is, they're kind of like apostates. They've been shown the face of globe and they've rejected it. Okay, let's see. Homelander is mirrored by Cody Rhodes in WWE. They call him the American Nightmare, says Chalk Body Outline. Yeah, and Homelander, Trump, Charlie Coker in A Man in Full, Trump, and in the Civil War movie, the president was Trump, and they had him killed. There are consistent themes here, and they're all political in their messaging. I can point to examples of predictive programming that have such specific political import that it's ludicrous to say, well, the universe is doing it. No, the universe is not doing public relations for the Democrats. The universe doesn't have a political bias that leans left and therefore lends synchronistic occurrences to make the movies a little more impactful and to predict future fake events. Like synchromysticism falls apart again. Ollie Goering says food tastes better while listening to IPS live stream. Isabel Ann says TDTS, Turbo Trump Derangement Syndrome. Well, I would say the most deranged by Trump are the Trumpers. That MAGA is Trump Derangement Syndrome at this point. Joined by Lord Dorkington. Thank you for joining. Tomino3 says the showrunner is a self-confessed lefty and hates the right. Oh, good point. This is a good finding here. Tim and Vic says 216 days from the Trump shooting till Captain America's Brave New World comes out. Okay, I didn't know it was that far in the future. And if you didn't see it, the trailer for Captain America New World Order, well, actually they changed it to Brave New World. And New World Order would have made more sense, considering how the RNC had the NWO symbolism. But again,
Thank you for feeding the Kraken, Lord Dorkington. The IPS appreciates the support.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Dorkington, for feeding the crack Gwyn. And what is the crack Gwyn? When the mass of auto hoaxers, when the raft gets big enough where it's impossible to ignore, then we invade the mainland. That's the crack Gwyn, and it's coming very soon. With your support and participation. So the Captain America movie trailer had Harrison Ford, who was born on 7/13, the day of the shooting, being shot at, and he's saved, and he falls on the ground like Trump did. There are multiple connections here. Harrison Ford in a theater, Ford Theater, Lincoln connection, but also the 7/13 is his birthday, the day of the shooting, and Julius Caesar's birthday. And Julius Caesar in the park performed in 2016 had Trump as JC, Julius Caesar, being killed. And the tagline said, "Lend me your ear," which might be another connection as well. Water Walking says, Hulk Hogan had blank, I don't know about that, Amber Rose. Now, Amber Rose is some kind of adrenochrome junkie. There's something going on with that one. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, dude, this is Jurassic. I heard you talking about Trump, so I called in.
Oh, yeah, someone had just pointed out that there was a 216 days until Captain America comes out from the shooting. And, of course, Captain America's trailer has the shooting in it. And then we were talking about this. Even the mainstream media is noticing these movies, predicting these things. But anyway, the drone thing. What did you think about that? The fact that, yeah, they actually found evidence that the shooter supposedly scoured the area with a drone.
Yeah, and I was mentioning it as soon as it happened, that how is it possible that the Secret Service doesn't have a $200 cheap drone, looking around, just making sure nobody is going onto any roof or anything? I mean, it's the most ridiculous, stupidest story I've ever seen in the history of stories. That.
Hey, let me answer a question. We says, are you saying they chose Harrison part because of his birthday? I'm saying that the scripted nature of the news media goes so far back, and we can point to examples, and this is all fact-based, this isn't conjecture. You can look at composite characters like an Elon Musk or a Donald Trump who existed in the world stage before we ever met them because they existed in predictive programming. So the idea that someone has a significant date because they're building up an archetype for a future role is easy. Yes, they gave him that birth date because of its symbolic import. What do you think, J.O.?
I absolutely agree with you, but not just because of his birthday, but his birthday is one of the reasons. Absolutely.
Exactly. But yeah, you called it on the drone situation, and now that's all the talk about how there was a drone there, and you suggested that the next time around, and it's going to be Iran who've already done the drone video, they're going to drone him, which is also interesting because wasn't Obama joking about using Predator drones against the guys that would be dating his daughters? I don't know if you recall that.
Well, it sounds familiar, but I don't remember what he said. But here's that connects also to 8/4 because Obama's born on 8/4, so you got a good one there.
Yeah, he actually joked about killing the Jonas brothers with Predator drones.
Oh wow, now that's interesting because one of the Jonas brothers really loves Elvis too. One of them, I can't remember which one, but.
I suspect there's something in here because he said Sasha and Malia are huge fans, but don't get any ideas. I have 2 words: Predator drones. You'll never see it coming. This was at one of these events, like the event where he made fun of Trump and said Trump would never be president. So it's one of these lines they threw out there, but I don't know. There may be some significance to it.
Yeah, and don't forget the very first time that when I was making these predictions before 2018, I told you what happened. That first time that August 4th came around, when I was predicting it the first time, Trump's head wound on August 4th, and what happened with the Venezuelan president. There was an attempted assassination on him.
Right, exactly. And that's the guy who was born the day after JFK's assassination.
And what day was it? It was August 4th in 2018, right, when I was first talking about it. And so it was August 4th, attempted assassination, and what were they using for the attempted assassination? It was 2 drones.
Yeah, 2 drones, exactly.
Man. Man. The predictive programming is off the charts on this one. Hey, I'm going to use I actually talked about Angel Has Fallen when it first came out, but now it's so relevant because of the drone. You just reminded me of it. But the other one I didn't know about, the Homelander one. That's a good one.
Yeah, the Homelander one, season 4, episode 8. I've noticed that you'll see the same code in the season numbers and the episode numbers. So you have the 4-8 thing, and it's so obviously predictive programming that they put a warning label on it. So if you want to watch the episode, it's like, warning, this is just like what happened with Trump. What a coincidence, right?
Because I'm going to be going live soon. I just want to use, because I'm going to use that one too. But what's with the Civil War one? Because I haven't seen that movie. So you're saying that it's a Trump based, or is it looking like Trump? What is that one?
It doesn't necessarily look like him, but it's not even a secret that it's based on Trump, and it's got the MAGAs across America. But they specifically require or ask or request a black female soldier to kill him. And this comports with this repeated theme, like Betty Pearson in Fallout, the massacre, and it has a blood spot on the Trump guy. But yeah, that's been the repeated theme. And then in the movie Man in Fool, Charlie Coker is Trump. They have him holding a snake at one point because he breeds rattlesnakes. Highly significant. And in that one, his death and downfall is engineered by a Chicago mayor who's based on Obama. So it's another Obama connection to the fall of Trump.
Well, interesting that you mentioned that, because the Chicago mayor that I wish I could say what I want to say, but you know what I say right before I say the word lawnmower? You know what? When 2 girls, you get what I'm saying? So anyway, this lawnmower, that creature, that bug-eyed creature, Mayor, was born on August 4th.
Oh, that's
What's that
interesting.
creature's name?
Yeah,
What's that?
Mayor Lightfoot, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
right. August 4th. Okay, interesting. So is Hakeem
Yeah, yeah.
Jeffries, who's the Democrat House Speaker, and like that's odd.
Yeah, yep, exact. And he was born in Crown Heights.
So you have the
You
crown
know?
again. Well, hey,
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
put your, if you don't mind, and I'll put it in there again. I'll just do it myself right now. People who are asking for your channel, I'm giving
Yeah,
them the
make sure you
direct
put the
link.
right one.
I have it
Make sure
now.
you put the right one. Yeah.
The
But
611.
while you're doing that, let me just say this. Don't forget to mention I mean, you might want to write this one down too. Don't forget to mention in The Sopranos, the 84th episode was called The Second Coming. And in that episode, I think they did play an Elvis song, but I can't remember now what was the Elvis connection to that. But it was episode 84 called The Second Coming.
Okay, and look, this is what really got me the other day. It was like Trump comes out on the stage, and it's just like the Elvis Second Coming, as in the comeback special.
Yep,
And
yep,
for people who haven't seen it, Trump comes out on stage to accept the nomination, and it looks just like the Elvis comeback special, and he's even reflected in the floor in the same way. That's wild.
exactly. That first thing I thought, and I did a video. And they showed the White House right after, which looks just like Graceland, where Elvis lived,
This
you
is
know?
yeah, this is
Yeah.
wild.
And then don't forget this one too. Uh, don't forget the movie Johnny Got His Gun. Remember that connection?
Explain on that one.
Yeah, so there was a movie, Johnny Got His Gun, and the only reason I even looked it up because I was thinking of Johnny Depp because he was saying that he wanted to. When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
Right.
Remember that he said that. So I looked up. You know, I was thinking to myself, could an actor do? So I was like, so I looked up Johnny and a gun or something, and this thing came up, and it was a movie. Look at the guy who wrote it and who's acting in it or whatever.
Dalton Trumbo, DT. That's okay. Okay, so you got
Yeah,
Don Trump kind of in there. Funny.
right. Well, Dalton is Donald. It's only if you take out the T and switch it for for a what? A D. If you took out the T and put a D, you'd have Dalton is Donald. And of course Trumbo sounds like Trump. And in that movie, Donald Sutherland who played Christ in that movie, and the release date of that movie was August 4th.
Okay, that's good too. And so John Dalton Trumbo. It's James Dalton Trumbo. So you have a DJT.
DJT, right.
Fascinating. So look, this is not a stretch to say that they plan these things decades in advance. These scripts are pre-written, and people have a hard time with this. We shouldn't, because the space program isn't something they're making up day to day. They map these stories out over decades, and then they fine-tune it as they go. So this isn't stretching my credulity to credulity. I'm like looking at this as this is their standard operating procedure, and these codes are so consistent. Very
Yeah, and
fascinating. Unbelievable.
one last one. One last one. Don't forget the David Bowie, who was born on Elvis's birthday, with the album called Resurrection on 84th Street.
Oh, that's interesting. Resurrection on 84th Street. David Bowie, Resurrection on 84th Street. And there's some fascinating connections between David Bowie and Elvis that have been remarked on. And, it goes on endlessly. But David Bowie is hugely significant in the whole space program and the modern transition into NASAtology. So, no coincidences here. And, of course, yeah, he had Elvis's birthday, and he died on, like, right after. But anyway, his posthumous album was full of clues.
Let me ask you this. I want you to take a look at something before I show it, and you tell me if it's anything interesting. That somebody brought this to my attention. I'm going to let you see it first before I even put it on my channel. Check this out. Go to a channel called Zigzag Static. And his latest video, check that out.
Zigzag Static. Okay, I'll take a look.
It's called, just real quick, it's 1 minute and 10 seconds. Watch it. It's called Ugly American.
Satan cleverly.
And tell me what you think. Listen to the words they use.
Okay, here it is. It's 1 minute and 10 seconds. Do you want to stay on the line when I play it?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just play this video. This is...
Remember, listen to the words.
In the video, for anyone who's listening, it came out 5 hours ago, and it's called Ugly Americans Predicted Assassination Attempt in 2010.
Now let's drop the ball and count down to the end of days.
And farewell, General Twain, Bone Reaper.
10, 9, 8,
I dare say, I hardly knew ye.
6, 5.
So if you're just listening, it has an Obama-sounding guy. That guy sounds like Obama, but this devilish character. And there's a shooter pointing a gun at him.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Aim for his heart, Lily.
Oh, wow. What the hell? He literally shot the tip of his ear off. Here at the 33... Look, this. I'm going to replay a short clip. So if you're looking, the assassin misses and shoots the tip of this guy's ear off.
Ow! Somebody shot my ear! Somebody shot my ear!
Who the hell is using live ammunition?
This ass up here!
This is unreal. What are we looking at?
Ever. I'm distancing myself from this mess.
I knew he'd trust.
Okay, this is bizarre. So I'm going to put a link below so people can watch it and take this apart. But the show's called Ugly Americans, and it predicted the assassination attempt with specificity. And what's the explanation?
Did you hear what they said? Did you hear the words they used? What? This was the worst the word pre-enactment.
Let me play this line again. This is the worst pre-enactment ever.
Worst pre-enactment ever. I'm distancing myself from this mess.
And he takes a fake head wound off. So it looks like his brain's exposed. And he says, worst pre-enactment ever. And he pulls that off. And that's a fake exposed brain. Like a wig, but with the brain on it. Very interesting. This is really interesting. I'm going to link this in the chat for anyone who wants to watch it.
By the way, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know who. Someone brought it to my attention, so I don't know who this channel is. I don't know nothing about it. All I know is I was just trying to see if you thought it was interesting, then I might show it on my channel. So
I would definitely do so, especially because the tip of the ear being shot off. And the year 2010, I was talking about how Machete has had specific predictive programming, and that was 2010. But yeah, pre-enactment, great find. Thank you for sharing this because this is a hit.
All right, bro. Anyway, have a good night and take care, man.
Awesome. Thank you for the call and have a great evening.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and post to Jurassic Liars' channel one more time here, so that you can subscribe to it because he's gonna be going live here shortly, and they're gonna be talking about this. And I've been saying that you have to suspend judgment. You don't have enough information when they show you something to know it's true, to know it's real. You have to wait. And for people who are jumping and saying, well, maybe it's real, I think I'm convinced, I would hold back. Wait another week, because as the predictive programming piles up, the evidence for the scripted nature of it is going to far outweigh the knee-jerk desire to believe it because it looks real. Looking real isn't good enough. Got some comments here. Pre-enacted, yep. End of days, says we. That sounded like Obama, but the Obama connection is significant. Violet Penguin says, good one. Wow, wow, wow. Chalk Body Outline Frank. Yep, that's what I'm saying. Wow, this is a good find. Thanks, Garrow, for that. That's why, exactly, Travis says, that's why we need as many eyes as possible to miss. We couldn't find all this stuff. One person couldn't be capable of finding all of the examples of predictive programming because it's in books, it's in comics, it's in video games, it's in movies, and it goes back decades. The Harrison Ford connection is just one example of how actors are used to carry propaganda messages, and these are roles likely planned from the time that they're born. Infinite Plane Radio.
Yeah, it's Lynn calling in just to fill in some details on subjects that you and your listeners might not be familiar with because you're younger. You're younger people. Dalton Trumbo, who you referred to before,
Yeah.
Hollywood screenwriter. He was a legend. He was famous. Your grandparents' generation and my parents' generation would have immediately known who Dalton Trumbo was because he was one of the Hollywood 10. Did you ever learn about the Hollywood 10 or the Hollywood blacklist during the 1950s, the purge, when they purged all of the people who had signed left-wing petitions in the 1930s? After World War II, when the Cold War started and Stalin was not our friend anymore, overnight, anybody who had any association with left-wing causes, and especially people who had joined the Communist Party, were hauled up before these committees in Congress and essentially asked to name their friends.
You're talking about like the McCarthyist witch hunts, the Red Scare, and all that?
Yeah, right. The McCarthy stuff was a little different. His thing, see, there were several different components of this. Part of it was the McCarthy thing. The McCarthy thing was pretty bogus, actually, because McCarthy was going around saying that, all the State Department employees were communists, and some of them had been. Some of the Alger Hiss, who Richard Nixon went after, and basically Richard Nixon made his name prosecuting Alger Hiss. But with respect to Dalton Trumbo, hugely successful Hollywood screenwriter, and when the purge came along in Hollywood, all the studios, everybody had to take a loyalty oath. Anybody who had it is interesting, by the way, I could go into great detail about this. Ronald Reagan applied for membership in the Communist Party USA. A lot of people don't know that. He was applying to be in the 1930s and 40s when it was fashionable to do this, believe it or not. And Eddie Arnold, who became a pretty successful Hollywood movie star, and he did a series on television with Zsa Zsa Gabor called Green Acres. Maybe you remember.
Yeah. In fact,
Eddie Albert.
I recall Green. I never watched Green Acres, but I do remember Trump made an appearance on Green Acres or something once.
Oh, I didn't know that. That had to have been an awful long time ago because the show was only on, and it was. I mean, it was on in the 60s and 70s, right? That would have had to have been a long time ago. Eddie Albert, that's what his name was. In Eddie Albert's autobiography, he discusses how he was asked by Ronald Reagan, who I guess at the time was also president of the Screen Actors Guild. He was asked to write a letter of recommendation for Reagan and his wife at the time. It might have been Nancy Davis or Nancy Davis, or it was either Jane Wyman or Nancy Davis. I forget, one of the two. They were applying to join the Communist Party, which was a very fashionable thing at the time. And Eddie Albert basically talked them out of it. Basically, what he says in his autobiography is that Reagan's understanding of politics was so shallow that he had to be warned of, you don't want to get involved in this. It's way over your head. And what happened, of course, is there was no problem during the war when the Popular Front sort of cemented this fraternal relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States because we were allies, together with the British Empire and whatever was left of France against Germany and Japan. So, and that started to change pretty rapidly once the ink was barely dry on the peace agreements, and especially Bretton Woods, which is where a whole new monetary system was devised before the so-called Iron Curtain descended upon Europe. That's Winston Churchill's phrase. But Dalton Trumbo, he was one of the Hollywood 10 who refused. The deal is this. You could say, hey, yeah, sure, I joined the party, or I'm still a member of the party, or yeah, I joined the party and I quit the party, or Well, I never joined the party. I signed a petition in support of the Republic during the Spanish Civil War. And I went to meetings. And in many cases, the party was they recruited very heavily in Hollywood. They ran a number of important unions. The West Coast Longshoremen Union was basically run by Harry Bridges, who had been one of the founding members of the Australian Communist Party. And so you found communists throughout the trade union movement, and as the Cold War progressed, there was an effort to purge them. I hate to be getting into this. I'm probably boring your audience.
Well, question here,
Dalton
though.
Trump, one postscript on Dalton Trump.
Dalton Trump, right.
Dalton, well, that's good. Right. Trumbo, whatever. He and others, what distinguished them was their refusal. Arthur Miller was another one. He married Marilyn Monroe, as you know. But Arthur Miller, very successful playwright, he had been a member of the party, but he had quit out of ideological differences. But he absolutely refused to testify, because what would happen, what the committee would say is, in order to now prove your loyalty, we need you to name or confirm. We're going to give you a list of names. We want you to confirm whether this person or that person was a member of the party or whether they attended meetings. So basically, the way you had to prove your loyalty to get your job back was to rat out as many people as they demanded. And if it was anybody you knew, anybody in your family, and Hollywood and Broadway were pretty tightly knit communities. And Trumbo refused. He was one of the Hollywood 10 who said, F you. I'm not going to rat out my friends. And Arthur Miller was another. And Arthur Miller went into exile. He went to a lot of them left the country. Dalton Trumbo went to Mexico. Obviously, he wasn't going to have work in Hollywood, and he didn't work in Hollywood for about 10 years. And then along came a highly successful actor named Kirk Douglas, and he hired Dalton Trumbo to write the screenplay for one of the great spectacles with a cast of thousands that I love to always refer to, these great Hollywood spectacles called Spartacus. And so that is really what, and Dalton Trumbo, and this, in doing this, what Kirk Douglas was doing was breaking the blacklist, the Hollywood blacklist. And at that point, all these former commies were basically rehired in Hollywood, or a lot of them got their jobs. Some of them had committed, I think one or two of them committed suicide. Movies have been made about this, but if you mention Dalton Trumbo, that's
okay.
What people of my parents' generation and your grandparents' generation would immediately think of. He was a celebrity. He wasn't just some obscure. It's not a fabricated name. You understand? He was a real individual who really lived. Right? He was famous. He was a celebrity. Got in trouble. And he was famous for good reason. So anyway, I can answer virtually any question you might have about not only the.
Well, let's answer a question about the current event. Is your take on the Trump event that it was entirely fabricated, a simulation magic trick, PR stunt, or do you think that real bullets were fired in an attempt to genuinely kill?
Oh, I would doubt any real bullets. I would doubt they would have done anything like fire real bullets. I mean, no. This thing was completely contrived. And if you're asking how much of it was prepared, and like with January 6th, I think people right away identified the fact that some of the material from January 6th, especially the episode where they're breaking the glass, that looks like it wasn't even videotaped at the Capitol, but rather was done at another location in advance of the event itself. And I would suggest that that's probably what we see with this Trump thing, because one of the things that's been pointed out is that there's editing of the clips the way they were presented to us, right? It's not a single continuous clip. You see all these people in the front holding up their cell phones, but the screen's blank. So that means they're pretending to be holding up their cell phones, but they're not really receiving or transmitting anything. We know that the crowd outside of a certain perimeter was cleared out of the area, but they're crisis actors, and they did have I guess it would qualify as a cast of thousands.
Yeah, a closed
I'm a-
closed movie set, big cast of actors, and many of those faces have been seen at other Trump events. So I'm assuming they all have some kind of security clearance. To me, it looks like an acting, or rather actors doing a magic trick, and it's likely that they did pre-record some stuff and they insert the shots. We would have no way of
yeah.
knowing.
When you see, there's detailed now, and this is kind of a good thing in a way. I mean, I guess we don't want people to get too obsessed with the details because as it's down a rabbit hole, tracking pistol and breadcrumbs. We don't want to get into that mode. But I have to say, I was really impressed by how much detailed forensic analysis there is out there now. Hours and hours of it from people who we know, like Jake Gibson or Tim Truth, has some extensive detail. I mean, there is so much detailed analysis of this whole thing out there forensically, and some people have identified editing in the clips where it looks like they moved people around. Some of the faces are in different positions. In other words, there's been editing and alteration of the visual material itself that indicates it was prepared in advance. This notion that this guy captured, what's his name, Doug Mills, this legendary photographer, captured and I'm going to call it now the magic bullet. This is going to be our new magic bullet. We should call it the magic bullet, because there is no way in hell from a statistical, it's like the hijacker's passport in the rubble of 9/11. What is the statistical likelihood, number one, that the photographer is going to have the special kind of high-speed film you need to capture something like a bullet, or that he's even going to be ready to be, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous, the idea that a photographer actually captured the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear. Come on, that's insane.
And you look at this guy and you're like, he's the guy who shot. So you have the bullet go by Trump's ear. Then you have him photographing the Secret Service whispering in Bush's ear after the plane hit the building. So the significance of the ear is highlighted. Same photographer, and it is very indicative of a staged event. And people look at these. They look at the Secret Service like they look like actors. They're acting foolish, but the way that they pose, it's too perfect. How did they line up to look like the Marine War Memorial with the flag above their heads? It's so contrived and fake that the claim that it's real is based on ignorance and faith in media. Like, no, it's obviously...
That's where I disagree with you. I think the claim that it's real is based on prostitution. In other words, if people like us can see this, and then I turn on the radio and I hear Dan Bongino, who claims to be a former Secret Service guy, trying to make out that this was real shooting, or all of a sudden, we have this plague of retired Secret Service agents and even currently active Secret Service agents, and they've all got an opinion. Oh, they've all got an opinion, and every one of them is trying to I haven't heard a single one of them raise the question of, hey, maybe this thing was staged and it was fake.
They're not allowed to.
And
now, what's your opinion? Dan Bongino, for example, is he unaware that it's fake, or is he in the know, consciously?
How could he not know? He's pimped out.
See, here's my question. My question
for
everyone
is a whore. Hey, Dan Bongino, if you're listening,
he's not listening.
Sue me if
but
you like.
it's
sue me if I want someone to pass the word back to him. Dan Bongino, you are a liar and a prostitute, because you know that thing was staged. You know it was fake as a cake in a lake, and you know nobody was actually shot and killed. And for you to be violating the Ninth Commandment by bearing false witness to death makes you lower than whale dung. And the same goes for all of you other former or currently active federal government employees, members of the Secret Service or other police agencies of the United States government. If you are getting out there and saying, well, I'm a professional and I have experience with this, and this is just incompetence on the part of the Secret Service, they had no idea what they were doing. And
It's a DEI thing. Yeah, it's such a talking point. But I'm curious. Like either either he knows, either
I want like the firemen,
but
like the New York City firemen
but you can't.
9/11. They're whores.
No, but you can't.
They're whores. They
but,
know what the truth is.
No, we
Just like
can't.
the New York City firemen,
We can't say that they all know. Apollo 11 required 400,000 people. I don't think more than 10 people knew.
Yeah, it's not some, and there are going to be people out there saying, well, they just don't know any better, or they took the download, or they're NPCs.
They're insulated. Why would they know? How would it ever come across their frame of reference?
Yeah, because,
I talk to people who say,
because we got people like us that have now put out hours and hours and hours of analysis.
This is not platform. There is no auto-hoaxing platform in the world stage.
They would have to go out of their way. Listen, they would have to go out of their way. It's like WTC7. It's like saying, it would be like if I confronted Dan Bongino and showed him WTC7 and he said he'd never seen that and never heard of it. I'm not buying it.
I talk to normies.
These people are whores. You're living in a nation
I have relatives who say the shooting looked real. And to be honest, if all you see what's on the news, it objectively looks real.
Right,
for example, when a magician pulls a quarter,
with even an ounce of curiosity can never offer up the excuse that, well, I watched CNN and they said it was real. Anyone who's professionally involved in this business and is not getting out on social media and Googling, and here's why I say this. Here's why I can confidently argue that all of these federal government spooks, and especially the former and current Secret Service employees who are lying, just like the firemen who were running.
I think it's too compartmentalized. I think it's compartmentalized.
Just like the fucking firemen.
All right.
Ran around
Wait.
after 9/11.
Do you?
They knew they were lying. They knew they're corrupting. Here's my proof. Newsweek is reporting, like yesterday, 2 days ago, that up to 30. A poll conducted, more than one poll, indicates that as many as a third of Democrats believe that this Trump event was staged. They are using the word staged. And about as many think it's possible that no one was killed. That is what Newsweek is reporting. Now, no one is more compartmentalized or sequestered or brainwashed than that 33% of Democrat voters.
I want to find this.
I don't want to hear excuses. I really don't want to hear excuses for whores, for prostitutes like Dan Bongino, who he would have been better to keep his mouth shut and say, you know something, I don't have any opinion yet. I want to wait till the smoke clears. But no, he got the phone call. He definitely got the phone call. This is what you're going to. He got the script to get up to there. It's called Circling the Wagons. And I've never seen anything more despicable, more disgusting or despicable than anybody who's handled an AR-15. And we got millions of Americans out there that have handled an AR-15 that aren't going to look at that picture of that bullet and laugh their asses off and immediately discern that this is in all likelihood a fake job. I don't care how much they might love Donald Trump. They're lying to themselves. If you want to make the case for self-deception, they really have to go the distance to be deceiving themselves for me to believe them.
I don't think they have it.
Any of these people.
I don't think they have the ability cognitively because they don't have the right frame of reference. To me, it's about philosophy, and they're believers.
No.
Believers don't have
You're
the.
making excuses.
I'm not making excuses. I'm describing the reality. Nope.
Everybody is.
Wrong. It's not an excuse. I'm observing. There's a qualitative difference between someone who automatically trusts something on faith and somebody who suspends judgment. It does matter. The reason why they
taking a second look, a fireman.
No, it's
the
they
day
don't.
After 9/11,
the normal
the
person.
week after 9/11, any fireman.
They don't understand what media is. They don't understand how scripted it is.
Any fireman that doesn't take a look. Any fireman that doesn't take a look and say, hey, I'm going to look at this. How did this happen? Who isn't even curious, I'm not buying it. That's someone who's making a conscious and deliberate decision not to look. And that's because they're a coward. And then the one who does look and says, this doesn't look right. I'm not going to look anymore. That's another kind of coward.
How would it ever arrive
And
in
then
their frame of reference? How would they ever see it? How would they ever? How would they ever arrive at contrary information?
Congratulations, we're going to make you the defense attorney because you're.
How would they ever arrive at it? I'm asking you.
There is no one who can justify the fireman that looks at Building 7 going down and continues to say, well, fires and structural damage did this.
No, but when it comes to the day-to-day
He's
fake
either-
news,
he's a
fake
coward,
shootings, fake terror
he's a
attacks, fake
coward,
space, and fake everything,
and we gotta-
how is the average person supposed to arrive at the conclusion it's
They're
fake?
morally corrupt.
No, they're not. No, it's
They're morally and ethically
they're
corrupt.
philosophically
They don't
corrupt.
want to know.
No, it's
They don't wanna
epistemology.
look.
It's
And I gotta
no,
do-
look,
and
I know
I gotta say
normies
this.
who trust the news. They're not morally
My
corrupt. They don't.
congratulations for those 33%.
They're not morally corrupt. The reason
that
why
1/3 of ordinary Democrats.
the reason why
who are
people
about
believe
as
the
normy
news
as you can
is they
get.
accept the screen as an argument from authority.
That's
That's a philosophical error. They're not corrupted. Nobody's paying off my grandma to believe the official story. She believes what she sees on the screen because they've accepted this as a premise. There's nothing that contradicts this ever anywhere. There's no platform. There is no platform for media skepticism. Point it out. Where is it?
They're gutless. No one should need a platform to use their common sense. No one should need somebody else to use their own common sense. And no one should...
Why did it take you so long to figure out nobody died on 9/11? For how many years were you assuming people still died, even jumpers? When did you figure out nobody died?
Well, that's one thing. That's different, but at least...
But we were still arguing with me. You were still arguing with me that people died on 9/11 up until a few months ago.
You're creating a moral equivalence from people who have been calling out the controlled demolitions almost from the day it happened. People like me and people like me have been calling out TV fakery since 2005. And you never even took a second look, and you joined the U.S. military. It's moral corruption. It's a deliberate shallowness. Hello?
I don't know if it's I think it's mind control.
It's a deliberate refusal to confront self-evident truth. I say again, some truths are debatable and arguable, but other truths are self-evident. I know a controlled demolition when I see one, without a doubt. I know it. I also know an economy destroyed by design deliberately. To me, that's a self-evident truth as well. Robbie Parker getting on camera and grinning and yucking it up. That's a self-evident truth. You can't look at a self-evident truth and argue with somebody about it. So if I run into somebody and say, I know a controlled demolition when I see one, don't you? And they say, no, I wouldn't. That's when I pat them on the back and say, well, Bob, okay. That's when the discussion ends. I'm not going to waste my time arguing with someone who is denying a self-evident truth because they're only doing that to shut down the argument, to shut down the whole discourse, to shut down the thinking process. If you say to somebody, well, some things are kind of obvious, they're self-evident. Really, what would you consider a self-evident truth? Well, I think a controlled demolition, when you see a perfect symmetric collapse of a skyscraper, that is a self-evident truth. There's no arguing about, hey, what you're looking at is a representation. No, it may be a cartoon. Who knows? It may have been created digitally, but one way or another, it is a representation of a perfect controlled demolition. And it ain't rocket science and never was. 9/11 never was rocket science. You're living in a nation of shallow people. Dalton Trumbo was a mystery to you, to your grandparents' generation. He was either a legend or a demon.
Would you? I would say program.
You never heard of him. You never heard of him. So we're living. What is the deep state? It's the United States of shallow. The United States of shallowness. People that don't know their history. They don't even know the official history, which I admit consists of lies.
I don't even believe that there is more than one government. If we're right, if they're using mind control on the scale they are, where they're faking the space program, it's safe to say there's only one government and there's a monolithic media apparatus that synchronizes all mankind. And this has been true for a long time. And yeah, it should be self-evident, but people are in the box and they can't see it from within the box.
These Secret Service people that are putting out YouTube videos, and I see them. They know what this. They know that they wouldn't have to look very far. They could be humble about it. They could say, this is very questionable. This doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. And we have to consider the possibility that this whole thing may be bogus. They could be humble about it, but that's not what they're doing. They're doubling down. They're doubling down. It's like the people who are still doubling down on the COVID hoax. Those people, they know what they're doing. It's a litmus test right now. And like I say, when I read that a third of ordinary Democrats are using the word staged, wow, congratulations.
I see that as progress in a way, but one thing to note though is that when I say staged, it has a different definition than when a normie says staged. They don't have the frame of reference to say it properly, but yeah, they're saying it right, but they're like firing in the dark.
Right. What they really want to say is Trump is in on it, just as he was in on January 6th. And in that, they're correct. So, and to me, it kind of buoys me up in a way because, here I'm drowning in the sea of lies from all these professional liars, these licensed professional liars, and it really disgusts me. Anybody that knows anything about firearms wouldn't be questioning the providence of that. That's now going to be a T-shirt or a coffee mug.
Yeah.
That a couple of those images, and especially the idea that they're letting him stand up and thrust his fist in the air when you know damn well they'd have had him down on the ground and out of there. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. And for these professionals to be coming on social media and saying, well, this was just incompetence on the part of the Secret Service, or
that's such a weak guardrail. That is a guardrail, and it leads, and people follow that stuff. And the fact of it is, if January 6th was fake, and if it's a bipartisan hoax, then why would they need to shoot him? He's not a threat to the system. He's playing by their script. So there's no reason. Nobody would want Trump shot from the deep state, since the deep state, so-called, would have been behind January 6th on both sides and behind it as a fake. So Trump wasn't shot at, Ashley Babbitt wasn't shot at. It's the same movie.
Well, you saw the cosplay at the convention with all the people wearing the, I guess now they got a MAGA hat that has a bandage attached to the right ear, so they can, their pictures coming from the Republican convention showed attendees wearing a bandage, a big white bandage over the right ear in solidarity with poor President Trump. That, to me, is exactly like the COVID mask. It's sort of an initiation investment, you might say. It's a sign of loyalty and compliance. And they're propping up the narrative by doing that. That is cult behavior. That is classic ritual cult behavior. These people wouldn't care if it was staged. And the big giveaway is, what is history going to recount as the decisive moment that determined Donald Trump would become president again? It was Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan endorsing Donald Trump at a Republican convention to huge audience acclaim, to a wildly enthusiastic audience. That's how we pick our presidents now, through the WWE.
What a statement, right? What a statement that you have.
It's a low-class country. This is a low-class country because when I was growing up, I can recall a time in the early to mid-1960s, right on up through the 70s, when professional wrestling, if you saw it on TV, it was considered just about the lowest, trashiest form of entertainment there was, even lower than the afternoon soap opera.
Well, people thought it was real up until it was admitted openly in the 90s, right?
I never believed that. I never believed that. I never believed that anybody, and there may have, look, anybody who thought it was, well, it depends how real you want to get. If we're to believe what Jay Gibson was saying on his video, that some of them covertly secrete tiny little blades, razor blades, and conceal them, magician style, and then when they want to, he's saying they cut their forehead so they get a real big, and he was pointing to one particular WWE guy who has a badly scarred forehead because he's been doing this for so many years. in other words, would go to the lengths of actually cutting their own forehead or their own ear to shed blood, to make a bloody mess in the ring, because that would be more convincing. I mean, I can't think of anything sicker or more twisted or possibly illegal, because I can't believe that the athletic commissions would allow something like that because of the public health implications of it. And I think we have one case of a WWE professional wrestler who claims that he got hepatitis because he was exposed. I doubt it's true, but I mean, still, I wouldn't want to be rolling around in that ring with real blood. Why should that even be necessary?
Right. Well, they did cut themselves. I had a family member who worked for WWE, and they threw the mats away every night. And at the time, I was a muralist, so I had an arrangement where I would meet this truck driver who would have the rolled up mats, and then I would take them and I would prime them and use them as my backdrops. So for a few years, I was doing my paintings on WWE mats, and that's because of the illegality of having something covered in potentially bloodborne pathogens being transported or reused. And yeah, it's a safety hazard. But yeah, I have a picture here of Hulk Hogan with his bloody face, and Trump is looking on. And this scene was referenced by Hogan, describing how Trump did the same thing. And I think that was kind of a giveaway from WWE Hall of Famer to Hall of Famer that they both bladed themselves on the way to obtaining victory.
The funny thing is, somebody of your generation, they wouldn't remember how trashy professional wrestling was considered when I was growing up. Actually, the classic scene that describes this is about, to me, this is about the decadence of America. It's about the lowering of the bar, not just dumbing down, but how now the language and the manners and the style of performance of WWE has basically pervaded every aspect of American life. But as I say, when I was young, it was considered really trashy, like supermarket, like WWE wrestling was to professional sports as supermarket tabloids were to the New York Times or the Washington Post. I know there's a lot of illusion wrapped up in that, because the New York Times and the Washington Post are lying just as much, but at least they're lying with a little bit of class, with some decent grammar and spelling. At least they've got a consistent narrative. But the people who would, or People Magazine became the mainstreaming of this kind of thing. And I can remember when it kind of dawned on me that this was actually happening. That first of all, huge money was being made in WWE professional wrestling. I mean, and Vincent and Linda McMahon were two of the architects of that, but Donald Trump played a pivotal role in it. And the classic, to give you an idea of how earlier generations viewed this style of performance and didn't consider it anything like real sport, the movie version of the Academy Award-winning film Requiem for a Heavyweight, starring Anthony Quinn as a burned-out punch-drunk boxer. I guess Jackie Gleason, Mickey Rooney are in that. And the bring down at the end, and here he is. The whole thing is a real tragedy, and it's a movie that's worth watching. At the end, Anthony Quinn, he's got concussions, he's dizzy and has headaches all the time, and he's finished as a boxer. But at the end, the only way his corrupt manager, can pay off his gambling debts to the mob boss who owns him is by getting this former boxer, at one time was a contender, to go get it put on like a Sioux war bonnet and feathers, and dress up like an Indian and dance around the ring as a professional wrestler, in one of these ridiculous American Indian costume, as a character. And at the very end, and this boxer, this is the one single shred of dignity and self-respect he's holding on to, that in his time, in his career, he never took a dive, he never threw a fight, he was a real contender, and maybe he is washed up, maybe he is finished. But this is the last thing in the world he wants to do, is put on a costume and get in the ring in order to be a professional, act like a fool in a professional wrestling match, so that his manager can pay off debts to the gangsters. And when I compare that to today, what is today's standard? Today's standard is Ronda Rousey, someone who I really looked up to, Olympic judo champion and a UFC fighter before she was very successful, before Holly Holm knocked her out. Ronda Rousey retires.
Well, wrestling has always been used, like WWE, as apart from real athletics, has been used for the theatrics of it, the pageantry, but specifically, and I have many examples here, 9/11 predictive programming, all throughout.
It's cultural messaging, that's all.
But it's government propaganda, and it's all predictive programming.
It never used to have the influence that it has now, and I was stunned a couple years back when I was involved on a Facebook page started by Brian Stavely around the Mandela.
Brian, or is it Ryan? I thought it was Ryan.
Brian Stavely. Brian Stavely. You know who we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Right. Brian Stavely, and he puts a picture up there. He puts a picture of himself holding up this WWE belt, one of these WWE belts. And apparently, I don't know whether he took a course or was doing amateur WWE style professional wrestling, but he was so enthusiastically wrapped up.
Midget wrestling.
And I realized, I said, oh my, it's like my estimate of him, my intellectual and cultural estimate of him, like dropped about 40 degrees at that point. And then later it was confirmed when he and some of the people on that Facebook page, I realized they thought that the Bible must have originally been written in the King James English. They had no idea that there actually was a Hebrew or a Greek or an Aramaic text to the Bible that they were claiming had been altered just because the English translation, because there are different English translations, and even the Church of England's translation has changed over time. So, they didn't understand. That's how that's how ignorant they were. And so I'm not, I was like I was so disappointed to think, oh, this guy Brian Stavely, who I've kind of looked up to, a big part of his life is this professional wrestling shit. He doesn't have any problem with it. It bothered me because when I was in high school, I knew some of the varsity wrestling.
If I was a Hulkamaniac, you would look down on it.
I remember I had a friend. I've had friends over the years who are fans of this stuff. They enjoy it because they like laughing at it. The classic image from the 1960s when you turned on television was these professional wrestlers would be throwing each other at one. One of them would get thrown out of the ring, and the spectators would maybe be throwing popcorn on top of them or something like that.
Right. Okay.
And some little old grandmother type in blue hair, with blue hair, would be waving her pocketbook around in the air and screaming at one of them, trying to hit him with her purse. That was the image we had of it. It just is really kind of low class, like, as I say, like the London tabloids. But I know how it happened. I know how American culture
So
got
some
trashed.
people enjoy it even though it's fake and trashy, and that's how I am with the news. I know it's fake and trashy, but I still enjoy it.
Well, yeah. How much of it though? Would you like, for example, would you go to a live WWE event like these? I've got clips out there of Donald Trump and Vince McMahon and talk about a cast of thousands, and they've got this huge audience, a huge stadium, audience, arena audience eating out of their hand. I mean, and there have always been. When I was living in Philadelphia in the 1970s, there was an arena right around the corner from me, under the subway stop, and I have to admit that place would be packed. And I began to realize, this is a really popular form of entertainment.
Bread and circuses. I think you're right. You know what? We can say it's just art, it's theater. Well, no, It's really not, because maybe they are denigrating
I don't
our
like to call
culture
it.
or making people more susceptible
I
to
hate them.
ridiculous characters and
I
stories. Yeah, it is kind of
I hated them calling it wrestling because I knew. Look, in my high school, you know, you had the freaks, you had the nerds, you had the hillbillies, you had the jocks. You know, yeah. And granted, you know, football players, basketball players, no big deal. But the wrestlers, they were smart. Invariably, they were also top students. They had to be really intelligent. And so, you know, I knew and hung out with some of the varsity wrestlers, and they were serious athletes. What they did, you know, I mean, you know, NCAA type wrestling. That they were varsity wrestling, high school wrestling. They were serious athletes and very sharp, very smart. And I hated the idea of this crap that I saw on television being called wrestling. It wouldn't have bothered me if they'd have called it something else. You know, slaps.
Now,
I don't know what.
Are you a fan of UFC? I mean, Trump's huge with
Yes.
UFC.
Yes, I am, and I know some MMA fighters. I've gotten to roll on them out with some of them. Yes, I mean, I that now, you know, I get in an argument with people about some people online in. I'm thinking in particular over at Pegologists who are convinced that the UFC is rigged, but I've never seen any.
Is it riggable? I mean, is it riggable the way they say? Like, I mean, I find that questionable.
I don't know. Audiences would never. Here's the thing: audiences would never put up with it because they want to see real. You know, here's how it's riggable. It's riggable through grappling. But if you're talking about standing there and punching it out, you know, they're not wearing boxing gloves in MMA. They're wearing these thin foam pads that do not really. You know, I'm surprised there aren't more broken fingers and broken hands.
No, they certainly did, or they do use UFC for propaganda messaging. They all lean far alt-right, conspiracy theory, flat Earth.
Right.
That's a staple.
Right.
They've appropriated it for Trump and Joe Rogan and toxic masculinity. But as far as the athletics of it, I don't know how riggable that is. To me, it looks real.
It isn't going to help. It isn't going to help when you hear Ronda Rousey. Well, actually, she after her retirement from MMA, she went to work in the WWE, but that didn't work out for some reason. She couldn't get along with them, and now she's bad. I think she quit doing that and is now kind of bad-mouthing them. But that, and also the corporate merger that Dana White negotiated between WWE and UFC, where they're now part of the same entertainment cartel. Is that right? That's not going to do any good for the credibility of the UFC. That's for sure. It's now because, you know, it's like once these things become thought of as sports entertainment, it means yes, they are at liberty to rig matches. And like I say, MMA boxing became legendary for Don King rigging matches. Most of the rigging that took place in professional boxing involved putting two very uneven opponents up against each other. So in effect, you were automatically.
Well, by the way, speaking of rigged fights, tonight, Jake Paul versus Mike Perry.
Right.
Now, isn't there a Mike Tyson fight coming?
It could be.
November 15th. They moved it back.
Yeah. Who was it? Was it you who were observing that Floyd Mayweather was basically holding up? Was it Jake Paul or Logan Paul?
He was holding up Logan Paul. I mean, it's like they were waltzing. He was holding him up. They were dancing because they needed to prolong it. But no, I mean, Logan Paul was out early on, in my opinion.
And none of this is going to do any good to the credibility of these sports. I agree, these spectator sports. At a certain point, people are going to become so cynical that they're just going to think, well, it's all rigged one way or another. So that's sad, but it's probably true that they're all riggable, certainly. I'm more concerned about there has always been corruption in professional sports. Arnold Rothstein rigged the 1919 World Series. He literally purchased, not him directly, but through intermediaries, because he could not be directly prosecuted. They tried to prosecute him, but they couldn't get him, but they got some of his middlemen. Actually bought all 9 members of the Chicago. Imagine that. and that's because the Chicago White Sox, the baseball teams, were so poorly paid in those days. And what's his name, Comiskey, the owner of the team, he was such a cheap ass bastard that these players really were kind of starving. And so when along came an offer for them to throw, and they couldn't make up their mind. So they threw the first few games, then they came back and won a few others because maybe they suspected they weren't going to get paid, and then when it looked like them, then finally I think they threw the last game or so. But one way or another, when the scandal broke, and you had little kids, the cliche now is the little kid saying, Shoeless Joe Jackson. Talk about cult of personality. I mean, every little kid in the country worshipped Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Isn't that a Mandela effect? If you build it, they will come. The whole movie with Kevin Costner is about Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Yeah, they run off that trope. And what is the the image that you have is the kid running out saying, "Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so. Deny it." And Joe couldn't deny it. I mean, they all took the money. They all took the money to throw the games. That's 1919 and Major League Baseball. So it's not like, boxing has had its corruption scandals, of course. And now we have people who are looking at the NBA and the NFL so closely. I could probably do an hour on all the NFL games that have been rigged, especially Super Bowls, walking through them one by one, and one involving from my hometown, the legendary Baltimore Colts.
That's so sad. I mean, people are like, I don't want to pay attention to the crappy news. It's bad news. I just want to tune out and watch sports because it's objective. It's a meritocracy. Hard work is rewarded. Perseverance, heart, grit, etc. Then you find out, nah, it's all rigged. You got to be in the club. Like, that's too much for some people to take.
I don't like the cultural debasement of conflating sports with what the WWE does, and I can't stand the idea that they allow that they have that. You would think the word wrestling, like grappling, could be trademarked so that it couldn't be abused. To me, the WWE, like the WWF before it, is guilty of fraud. By using that name, they're marketing fraud. But at the same time, and also they have their terminology. So, for example, when we talked about cutting, that would be in the rather esoteric realms of kayfabe. Kayfabe. I think it's pronounced kayfabe. It's supposed to be a pig Latin word that when you rearrange, I think it says be fakey or something like that. But it refers to that whole tool chest, toolbox, or repertoire of techniques that these participants in professional wrestling can use to simulate injury, how they simulate.
Well, it's good to know this stuff. I call it fakeability. Like, we need to know what special effects they have at their disposal. And if this is an easy special effect, then we can now rule out that every time you see a bloody face, it is therefore the result of an injury. And I think this Trump thing was likely blading. I think Trump's a cutter.
It could be. On the other hand, it could be like that final scene in the movie, another Academy Award winner, The Sting, with Paul Newman and Robert Redford. At the very, very end, they fake a shooting. And Paul Newman shoots Robert Redford, and then Paul Newman in turn is shot by the guy that's supposed to be an FBI agent, but really he's another one of these con artists. And they simulate an assassination, and people should just watch that.
What's the movie called? Scene. This sounds good. What is it?
Oh, it's famous. The Sting.
The Sting. Okay. Because I just found out that Frank Sinatra has both The Manchurian Candidate and the movie called Suddenly, that were both cited as inspirations for Lee Harvey Oswald. They're
about assassinating a president.
Predictive programming has always been built into entertainment, always.
Well, we're glamorizing it and mystifying it by calling it predictive
No,
programming.
we're not. We're defining it. Because if you call it synchromysticism or coincidence, then you're mystifying it. But it is predictive programming. These are propaganda messages inserted into the collective psyche via entertainment to prepare them for future fake events.
How's that any different from ordinary social, cultural engineering?
It's not. You could just call it marketing. You really could.
Right, PR, marketing, propaganda. But certainly, when you've got Secret Service agents coming out of the woodwork and circling the wagons to get on media and argue about patently stupid, insulting, like I say, it's like running into firemen after 9/11 trying to tell you to, the structural steel weakened and the thing collapsed. And, well, I don't know. I'm not an architect.
I can tell you don't like being gaslighted. And I don't think anybody should. Most people don't know they're being gaslit, but it definitely irks you because you know that they're telling you something that contradicts your perceived reality. They're trying to superimpose a false reality over what you saw and what you know, and that is insulting. It's condescending.
Oh, this goes back a long ways. This is probably the earliest memory I have of how infuriated, angry, and disgusted I felt by having my intelligence insulted by grown-ups around. I fully expected other children to be stupid, but what I didn't expect was to have adults peddling bullshit to me and expecting me to go along with it. Now, I was objecting to it from a very early age. And so when 1967-68 rolled around and phrases like the credibility gap, that's another one that, that my generation remembers, but you probably have forgotten, you wouldn't be familiar with it. But in terms of the Johnson administration, for example, their claims about the Vietnam War, which on a daily basis became ridiculous, utterly discredited. They were flip-flopping 180 degrees from one day to the next and getting caught in their lies and everything else. And I think maybe the media wanted to discredit them because we were getting to see a lot of that stuff that maybe otherwise had not been presented to people during, say, the Korean War. And it became known as something called the credibility gap. Auto-hoaxing. I mean, that's essentially what it was. We were auto-hoaxing, except we were auto-hoaxing our government.
Right,
right.
The loss of faith and the loss of trust. And this is the reason why I don't think you can reach normies, is that they have been turned into faithful believers in the state church media. I mean, it's the same. It is the state church. They become faithful. And so they approach it not intellectually, but emotionally and as believers. And that's why they're all dupes, and nothing can change that until they change how they perceive it, which isn't going to happen. Not on its own.
I'm saying just plain old corruption and racketeering, and I want to dissolve the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, CIA. I want to shut these institutions down. They're rotten to the core. And this is the Secret Service. Absolutely purge it, dissolve it, start something else, rename it, do something. These institutions are finished. They're finished, and they got to be finished in the eyes of the American people as well. And so if the institutions themselves, these government agencies and bureaucracies, are now utterly discredited and really poisoned now, there is short of abolishing them, you're really putting an end to the United States government as any sort of credible institution. I don't know if everybody's ready to become a world citizen now and completely, give up on the United States. But I'm saying that if anybody, if I were to take seriously the claims of, say, these MAGA people, they want to make America great again, or they want to restore something. They want to restore the Republic. I don't know what they think they want to do. Well, the first thing they'd have to do for me to take them seriously is abolish these corrupt, rotten institutions. And the Secret Service is right up there with them. Because we now know, based on what they've done with this last event, we can confirm that they've been part of the trickery and the faking and the hoaxing going all the way back to the JFK event. Actually, this is what I took away from the whole time.
New Kofi shop sale from McDaniel.
My inside sources at the CIA had told me about JFK, it's all fake. That's his words. It's all fake. It's all fake. Well, what do they mean by that? So to me, it's just time to... People complain about these organizations and institutions. Oh, they do this. They commit crimes. We went through the church committee hearings in the 70s. The
I hear you
Rockefeller
on
Commission.
this, but I think we're looking at a hydra. So you chop off one head, it's got other heads growing to replace it, and until you attack the thing as a monolith, there is no changing it. I think we're conquered. I don't think resistance has any purpose here. I think resistance is futile and actually feeds the beast. I don't think getting rid of any of these would make any difference because it's a monolithic entity at the end of the day. They're all integrated. And these individuals
I don't want to pay. Listen, I don't want to pay taxes to prop up this parasitic institution called NASA. We don't need that. They should privatize. They should go, they should become like Disney. Go right into the entertainment business.
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't want to subsidize NASA anyway. I know they're probably not getting that much. Pentagon's getting an awful lot to fake us out. I mean, I'm talking about how you would salvage the American economy is to stop funding a lot of these operations. And I want to throw these people out on the street too. These liars and traitors that work for these agencies, I want to toss them out. I want them to have to struggle with day-to-day survival the way so many of us ordinary people.
So that's a strong point. If you could make the case that not only is NASA fake in itself insulting, but it's malfeasance. We're talking billions of dollars thrown into some black hole, and that could be put to infrastructure. It could be put towards real science, towards a lot. But the fact that they're taking this money every day and directing it into mystification and mind control, to me, I think it's an unsolvable problem. But if you could shine a light on that, you could generate collective outrage. But it's not going to happen because you would think the people who would I think it won't happen because ultimately the space program is promising this utopia, and a lot of people just buy it left and right. The utopianism of the space program, they see it as a good investment. They really do.
Imagine having one or more of your children attending the public school system or any school system that would be teaching that we walked on the moon. That's unconscionable. How could you do that? Every day the child comes home, you'd have to be looking at their homework. Oh, what's your assignment? Oh, I'm supposed to research the Apollo 11 and how we walked on the moon. Or any parent, what serious parent who understands it's bad enough that they would insult our intelligence with these stupid hoaxes, this ridiculous fakery, the ISS and all this stuff. But I don't want them doing that to the next generation of children. That is a crime. That is a crime. That's beyond malfeasance. That's sadism, to be brainwashing kids to think this is real. Now, you can say, what'd you do at school today? They taught us this bullshit that we walked on the moon, but I know it's bullshit. And I think that's the direction that we're moving in. Really, people are just not going to believe anything they're told. And that's
they may sacrifice the moon landing. There's a new movie out called Fly Me to the Moon with Scarlett Johansson, and it seems like they're softening the public up for a revelation that, yeah, we had to fake it to trick the Russians, but everything else is real. And people will be like, okay, cool, we did it. They'll take pride in that.
Well, that's just making that. You know what that is? That's saying something you don't even really believe, but using it as an excuse not to do anything. And that's slave mentality there, right? If someone says that to me, I'm saying, hey, you don't mind having your intelligence insulted by all this. You obviously don't mind paying for it, but what you really don't mind is having them treat you like you're stupid, and then pretending that you believe them, that you're going along with it. You're not offended or insulted by that. That's an utterly inappropriate emotional affect.
Well, it's a fact, though, that you could not graduate high school today without being a believer in all of the state contemporary myths, all of the fake news, which becomes history. And that's one of my points here is that they're faking the news, but they're also faking history because everything that they put on the screen goes into the history books, no matter what contradicts it.
You couldn't get a pilot's license. You can't get a pilot's license if you're. Won't they? It seems to me I've heard pilots on, it might have been on one of your broadcasts, someone with a pilot's license discussing the pressure that was put on them, how they were even threatened with revocation of their pilot's license because they're, questioning the spinning globe cosmology and suggesting that really there's no way that ordinary standard operating procedures in flight confirm that at all. That that basically we could just, to all intents and purposes, to pilots, the Earth is flat. When they map out their routes on that UTM map, it's flat. It's rectangular and flat. So, but yeah, the social pressure, certainly the social pressure would be enormous. And I feel bad for the people that have jobs at NASA or careers at NASA, and they think they're doing something worthwhile. I don't know what or NOAA's another one too, But this thing, it's so out of control and it's so corrupt. And my suggestion is that if these institutions, you're right, it does have to be taken on a global monolithic scale. I agree. You really would have it wouldn't be enough just for Americans to take on NASA. You'd have to have Russians taking on the
Roscosmos. Exactly.
Right.
It is such a big thing that to take part in a side or in a compartment is to actually lend your energy into maintaining the thing, maintenance. It's like, at this point, if you're a moon landing denier but you believe in the bigger space program, well, your deconstruction of the moon landing is probably helping them because they're going to sacrifice that to save the entirety of the space program. So people aren't going full fake. They're being misguided. Like you have like Bart Sabrell, who's like, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, but he never discredits outer space itself. So they will make a sacrifice of Apollo 11, I think. Possibly.
At what point does the limited hangout become simply making excuses? And what you're really saying is, well, it really doesn't matter.
I think they're waiting for Buzz to die. I think they're waiting for the astronauts who took part in this big deception to die so that they don't have to face retribution. And then they'll say, these guys were heroes and they kept their lips sealed because of national security. That's one possibility. I want to watch the movie and see what they...
You think they'll admit they faked it?
Well, that's Fly Me to the Moon, and then you have a Nolan movie, Interstellar. There has been some foreshadowing for the moon landing being deconstructed but saving space, and that might explain why so many moon landing experts are limited hangout operatives.
I'm convinced that the meta script for all of this, and especially the Biden characters and the Trump character, is just a takedown of the whole thing. In other words, the idea being, if everything becomes reduced to clown world and idiocracy, and it's about the takedown of the West. It really is, and especially the United States. And we'll see it in declines in standard of living. We'll see it in collapsing, rotting infrastructure. We'll see it in the cities. Really, I don't know what to say about what's happening in the cities, but I don't see any improvement, and I don't know how low can they go. Really, how bad can things get in a place like San Francisco or Philadelphia or New York? Of course, the way I feel about New York City is the ground could open up and swallow them all, and I wouldn't miss them. Because New York City will always be 9/11 town to me. It will always be the city where the people themselves rolled over for this huge, massively corrupt racketeering scandal called 9/11. Racketeering, insurance fraud, reckless endangerment, a lot of things.
I do agree.
Everybody rolled over for it, including the firemen and the dirty, dirty cops.
In this meta script, America is Babylon. America is taking a fall, and there's no stopping it. They wrote the history in advance, and we're witnessing it, and we're calling it out fake, but that doesn't change it. So we're watching, essentially, the structured takedown, and they've been telling us the story with the sinking Titanic, the falling towers, and I think the next culmination of it is going to be likely this global blackout thing as represented in Leave the World Behind. all symbolic of the fall of the West, Western values, individualism, property ownership, and people like Elon Musk having too much influence. They're preparing the masses to accept the takedown of all of that.
So I'm calling it Make Babylon Great Again.
That's what MAGA means. The MAGA hat, the scarlet across the brow.
We should rub that in the faces of all these so-called Christians that are getting behind this guy who's on his third wife, and he's trolling along a busload of strippers and a carload of hookers who are blackmailing him, and somehow he's a representation of Christian virtue and patriotism here in America. And, you know, God intervened to save him on that platform the other day. I can't, it really is disgusting, really disgusting to hear some of these people out there propagating this stuff and calling themselves Christians. Other Christians should be denouncing them. But then again, Christians have never struck me as people who particularly who could care one way or another if their intelligence is insulted. They're perfectly willing to behave like sheep, really, like total gullible sheep. They wouldn't stand up against the COVID psyop. Very few Christians stood up against the COVID psyop. We watched the cancellation of Easter and the Pope's blessing in St. Peter's and the cancellation of Christmas, and we witnessed the canceling the walk up to Via Dolorosa that probably for centuries, you know, it probably hasn't been canceled since the last crusade. And the Hajj to Mecca, that got called off. The Wailing Wall was shut down.
COVID Akbar. It's the new devil that the atheists will believe in, and they worship it, just as they worship Gaia. And I find it to be expected. I think they're sacrificing traditional America. They're sacrificing MAGA. They're sacrificing the idealized past in favor of a progressive utopia.
Yeah, but if you listen to
narrator dialogue, okay, button, exiting narrator.
At the Republican convention, but they've gone woke. They have. It must be really humiliating for the people who are sort of these old time, you know, conservative Christians, because you know who's running the show there at the Republican convention? They're the log cabin Republicans, the people you talk about, the Ollie Alexanders and the, you know what I mean? Really, in a way, they're taking the Christians for a ride, right?
Oh, they do. It's just another group to pander to, and it's very shallow. They worship Trump. They worship JFK. They basically worship a golden calf. I think it's pretty obvious now.
That's my question. What will people remember? Will people remember, I guess he's the president of the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien? Will they remember his speech? Which, by the way, was kind of interesting because he's trying to make the case that now, you know, this is the new working class movement or something like that. Will people remember him, or will he be forgotten? And what people really remember is Hulk Hogan. That's got to be the iconic, defining moment of this Republican convention. Is Hulk Hogan? I guess, did he actually place Trump's name in nomination? Who's going to do that? Has that happened yet? The one who they picked to make the nominating speech is usually pretty significant.
Yeah.
Because I remember one year they had Clinton make the nominating speech for, might have been Dukakis or something like that.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Reality TV show president, WWE Hall of Famer.
Right.
It fits the zeitgeist. It's totally on brand.
The zeitgeist, yeah, that's it. Because, right, Trump, this is what Trump has brought into, and, you know, people shouldn't kid themselves. We saw this with Ronald Reagan, didn't we? I mean, they brought him in out of Hollywood, and people said, "Oh no, now we're going to have actors basically in the White House." And if I'm to believe the latest forensic deconstruction of the alleged assassination attempt on Reagan by John Hinckley back in 1981, I guess, if I'm to believe any of that. They've got James Brady getting up and walking around. This guy supposedly was shot in the head, and he's up and walking around on video. So, you know, that looks like now it was a total fake job.
Oh, yeah.
So,
that was a total fake job. It was inspired by Robert De Niro. Think about it. Robert De Niro, who is all Trump deranged recently, was the inspiration for Hinckley going after Reagan and, of course,
Right, and
Brady.
he said, I did it for Jody. I did it for Jody. I did it for Jody. And he's out now, and I understand he does a musical performance at nightclubs. At really a coffee. I understand he actually has a traveling music show and is publishing songs. John Hinckley. He's out.
Yes, yeah. John Hinckley is a musician. I think he's got a social media site. And yeah, I think he was an actor all along. I think I want to point out, too, there are no patsies. When you auto-hoax the MSM, you have to reject the premise that there are patsies who are set up to do something and they're taken out. Nope. Nick Cruz, John Hinckley, Saran, these are all actors on the world stage, crisis actors.
And Sarah Brady, I imagine, is cruising her way to a very comfortable retirement based on all the money that's been raised by the Brady gun control movement. It's been in existence now for like 30 years or more, I guess, since the event itself, or however many years. I'm sure they've raised millions and millions of dollars from the people who really don't know any better out here. You're right, the people who are stupid enough to be fleeced. I bet Sarah Brady's definitely got a comfortable retirement from all that fundraising now that her hubby's gone, I guess, if he's really dead.
Oh, Brady died. Brady's death was declared a homicide 33 years after the shooting, if you can believe it.
Well, that's ridiculous. I don't think, I don't think it works. Well, then that means they need to recharge Hinckley, right? Why haven't they rearrested?
Ooh, good point.
John Hinckley?
Why hasn't Hinckley been charged with homicide retro?
Right.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, how can they, we're going to make it officially a homicide, even though we're not going to, the guy who did it is out and about. Yeah, I must have seen a brief interview with him, so. But, yeah, this has got to bounce back in real terms, in terms of the economic system, and especially the collapsing confidence in the dollar. That's what concerns me, that we're going to start seeing more inflation. We're going to start to see a decline in the power of the dollar globally, especially as the BRICS thing. The takedown of the West is about more than just culture. It's also about economics. It's about manufacturing. It's about trade. It may be about naval dominance at some point. So there are material consequences to the decline of the West, and especially the decline of the United States. And I imagine people are already starting to feel the effects of those material consequences. But that's no excuse for people to be going along with silly, dumbass bullshit. Really, like this latest Trump event. There's no excuse for people to be rolling over and falling for that.
I think there is. Look, I think there is an excuse because they don't have the frame of reference or the education to see through media. They're programmed. The programmed don't have a way out of it. They don't have the time, the inclination, and they're philosophically screwed. Their epistemology's been reversed. They put their head through the screen. They can't see the big picture. Big truthers can't. Every major influencer is in the box, whether they're dupes or agents. So I think there's no hope for an awakening. I think resistance is futile. The best we can do is aggregate those who have voluntarily deprogrammed. And then once that is our core, then maybe we can talk about what to do with Normieville. But for the time being, I think that they're comfortably numb, and they don't want to be disturbed.
No, it's non-linear for me. That 33% or one-third of registered Democrats who are already calling it as staged, I got to salute them. And now we should take them a step further. Staged, well, when you say staged, you mean Trump was in on it. Well, if Trump was in on it, that means the Secret Service was in on it. Well, that means nobody really died. Well, how often do you think they've been doing something like this? It just opens the door to all kinds of great conversations.
It does. It's a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift. And, I think that a lot of people are smart enough, obviously, to see through it. They just haven't been presented with it. And what we do here is consolidate the best ideas, formulate a methodology, and I'm willing to test it. The whole point of Auto Hoaxology 101, the textbook, is to take this and promote it heavily and see what kind of disbelief we can foment. See if we can actually create a paradigm shock to the system. I want to see how resistant the world stage is to legitimate criticism, because it hasn't had it yet.
And like I said, we should be using this as a litmus test to point out who all the liars are, who are the people who are deployed on media, on television, on AM talk radio to lie, like these Secret Service people. They're consummate liars.
But I also want to point out that the news consumers are liars too. Every person that becomes a believer in MSM is by default a liar. It's a world of liars. They are liars.
Yeah, but it's one thing to be able to dismiss media as tabloid silliness. When you start seeing public officials, or especially people that trot out their military resume, well, I was this, or I'm retired from that, I'm an expert, and I'm going to tell you about this. And they're propping up a bullshit narrative. And there are a lot of them out there. There's professors out there doing that. There's think tank people out there doing that. There's military types, and that's just a measure of how thoroughly compromised and prostituted our institutions are. That the people who we, at one time or another, sort of look to at least give us a straight, the people who are ruling over us.
Have we ever had a media that was telling us what reality is and informing us? Never. We never have.
Never had a media, but it's the public officials, right, who instead of coming out and speaking honestly are propping it up and giving it legitimacy. That's just despicable. That's just despicable. I don't want to beat that to death, but I'm holding them accountable for that. I'm not going to accept any excuses from any of these alleged professionals that claim to know, how security works during a presidential campaign and are not denouncing this thing as an obvious stage setup when at least the third.
But I mean, let's go back to Dan Bongino. Calling out Dan Bongino is okay, but calling out Dan Bongino is the same thing as yelling at a character on a movie screen, because their world stage role is a mirror of what you see in the movies. It's all just programming. They're actors reciting scripts.
He's collecting a government pension. That's selfish prostitute. That whore. I wish I could say it to his face. That bastard is collecting a government pension off us. He should keep his fat, stupid mouth shut, or maybe speak the truth once. But for him to
I don't think he could. I don't think he could, and it wouldn't do any good. It's outside their. It's outside their purview. It wouldn't even make sense.
He's a cheap.
It wouldn't.
Cheap grifter.
Even if
discount code Bongino.
Even if Don Bongino became an auto hoaxer, if he just went out and started breaking it down, it would go over people's heads. The news bent. He wouldn't be exposing it anyway. It's the nature of government. It's the nature of the world state.
I really anticipate at some point they're going to have to back down on this and admit that it was staged. I really think that the trend toward denouncing this as a hoax is not going to go away. A lot of people are going to be jumping on it. And it may be the last resort of all these Democrats, too. What else can they say at this point? Otherwise, Trump becomes a martyr and God intervened to save him with a magic bullet. But it just nauseates me to see somebody, had one of these government jobs and says, well, I'm an expert and I'm going to tell you, and then lies their ass off. And is obviously being compensated. He's on media. He's got a radio show. What a piece of shit.
So I think for someone like him, it's possible that they're so insulated, they never arrive at the truth, and so their reactions are far more authentic.
Yeah,
I certainly think so. I don't think, there's no way he knows the totality of the fakery. No way.
Look at the crap that he sells. He's a cheap grifter and a whore. Trump is a cheap grifter. I mean, Trump sells everything from steak knives to Bibles.
Well, Trump is a character, and he has no autonomy. And the character we see as Trump pre-existed him. As we pointed out, from Trackdown to Machete, you can find examples, and Biff Tannen, of Trump as he is today, pre-existing his current state in movies decades before. So he's an entire construct. And to say that he's a grifter, well, that's kind of fake. His character has the qualities of being a grifter, but he's not just a grifter. He's a world stage personage.
Yeah, I guess somebody could make that defense if they were on trial.
No, it's not a defense, but actually it is a defense in the sense that you couldn't charge somebody for a crime they committed on a movie because it was just a script.
Well, what if they committed a crime using a false name, like Jesse Ventura, whose real name is James Janos? You know, what if they? In other words, what if they used like Hulk Hogan? That's probably not his legal name.
Like getting mad at politicians might be the equivalent of yelling at the movie screen when you don't like the protagonist.
I want to defund them. I want to shut them down. I want to shut down these agencies, shut down these bureaucracies, shut them down. I want to defund the FBI, defund DHS, defund CIA, defund NASA, defund the FDA, which is rotten to the core. After this whole COVID business, the CDC and the FDA should be shut down.
Do you consider yourself an
activist? I want to toss
Are you an
federal
activist?
employees out on the street. You better believe it.
Do you consider yourself to be an activist?
That's not anymore. I had an activist phase in my life. That is to say, I for about 20 years, I was super activist. I'm too old to get out and do that anymore. And also, the nature of activism has changed. You know, and this is something a situationists observed, and that now basically they can stage performances and masquerade as activism. But I will tell you, just give you a sort of a hint of where I would like to see things go. One of the most effective public relations propaganda campaign I can remember against the Vietnam War and against the United States government was a presidential campaign run by the Youth International Party, the Yippies. This would have been Jerry Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin. And they ran a pig for president. The pig's name was Pegasus. And they actually did a national tour, and they turned it into a massive media campaign during the presidential campaign of 1968. They ran a pig for president. That's the kind of campaigning and activism I want to see. I want to see activism that just utterly devastates and destroys the moral authority and the legitimacy of all institutions. That's where I want to go with this thing. Now is the time. I'm for the maximum program.
Awesome.
So, yeah, and we can use humor and ridicule to do that. It was really effective, and I think one of the climax of the Yippie campaign to run a pig for president was when they scattered $1 bills on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, just so people could capture newsreels and videos of everybody scrambling on the floor to pick up dollar bills. Yeah, like pearls before swine or something like that. So, yeah, that's the kind of activism I would be looking for. Something that is like the maximum program, over the top, complete, utter rejection of the legitimacy of these institutions. And then, you know, the American people will say, we don't want to pay for this anymore. It's time to defund it. Maybe. In my fantasy world, it would be defunded.
In a sane world, but unfortunately we're outnumbered. Well, thank you for the call, and thanks
I'm willing to barricade New York City. I'm willing to barricade New York City until they arrest the perps on 9/11 and let them all starve to death. That's how I feel about it. I'm very radical about this. Yeah, all right, good talk.
Well, I understand you want to see some accountability. Well,
I want to see some accountability. Yeah, I do.
Thanks.
Consequences. Yeah.
Well, thanks for answering our calls here and giving us your take on it. And I'm glad you didn't fall for the Trump psyop. I didn't think you would. But yeah, it's good to hear that you are.
I'd look pretty stupid if 33% of registered Democrats say it was staged, and I wouldn't, and I don't.
Yeah. Yes. Excellent point. If they can see through it and you can't, I don't know what that would mean. Anyway, thanks. Thanks for the call. Thank you. Okay, so someone has a question. They said, "What is the absolute earliest predictive programming example that you're aware of?" I would say 1958 Trackdown has a con man named Trump, who says that the village is being threatened by a cosmic threat, and he's going to build them a wall. So you got Build the Wall, Space Force, Cosmic Threat, Snake Oil Salesman, that they drive out of town. I would bring up perhaps Mars, A Technical Tale, written by Werner von Braun. And the Mars, or Project Mars, A Technical Tale, was published in 1949. And it's about an Elon who becomes the first man to colonize Mars, and he builds a governmental structure analogous to the papacy. This would be predictive programming. I would look at Jules Verne, often described as the father of science fiction. He predicted the invention of and many details about the submarine, among other things. Here's the 1863 novel that predicted the internet, cars, skyscrapers, electronics, and dance music. I happen to think that a lot of this isn't prescience. They're not just good guessers. This isn't Texas Sharpshooter where we're just picking out those that align with the future. There are a number of authors who were there specifically to define our new paradigm for us. I guess I would even add in perhaps Red Star, which is a 1909 or 1908 novel about a communist society on Mars. And this preceded space travel. And it goes into detail about this perfected utopian society on Mars and why we should implement it on Earth. But since the inception of media, and there are many clues about the role of media as the pageantry of the state church that were divulged by Kenneth Anger, who died last year, shortly after Barbie came out. And Barbie is starring Margot Robbie, who was in Babylon, which is actually written by this Kenneth Anger, which is why I bring him up. And he had the perspective and the vantage point at the very beginning of the emergence of Hollywood, and from his insights and his role on the world stage, I think he's accurate in describing that media has always been the pageantry of the state church. So it's always been programming. There may be independent voices here and there, but to get anywhere, to reach mass audiences, to not be censored, you do have to respect the parameters of the world stage. And science fiction is gate kept. There's very little variation. Every sci-fi I watch is after the 20th century or after the 21st century, climate change destroys everything. This is what happens. Or this many years after the nuke. It's always dystopian. It always assumes the path we're on ends in disaster. Sci-fi is incredibly gate-kept, and it lends itself to cultural pessimism. And it's designed to convince you that we need to change the way we're doing things right now, or we're going to end up like that. Ugly Americans predicting the assassination attempt. This is an example. This is the assassin from Zigzag Static. And I posted a link. I'll post another link. We had a Garrow call in and bring this up. And yeah, shout out to Garrow for giving us the first look at this before he shared it on his site. And let me play this clip, a show called Ugly Americans predicting
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Aim for his heart, Lily.
There you have it. Shooting at the president, and it shoots his ear off. Again, this is called The Ugly Americans, and that's from 2010. Here's the face of the Homelander, bloodied. And the Homelander, again, has a warning label on it because it so closely matches. Slate Magazine. It was a perfect show for the time we're living in. Thursday, I couldn't help but feel like its relentless satire has grown toothless, which is odd because The Boys has rarely been more connected to the national discourse. The finale, initially titled Assassination Run, in reference to the major twist, paving the way for Homelander to ascend towards supremacy, parallels with the Trump assassination attempt. The parallels were so stark, Amazon removed the name from the episode and added a content warning. So again, this is another blow against the synchro-mystic explanation for things. And they want you to mystify things. They want you to think God saved Trump. Here's the flag. An angel wrapped itself in the American flag and saved Trump. That's been a story. And now they're saying, this is a big channel, a flying saucer has been spotted during the Trump assassination. So what does that mean? Now, it's probably a drone, but they're saying it's a flying saucer. The aliens saved him. The Q people are going crazy with this. It's like, yeah, Jesus or an angel rode down on the flying saucer so they could stop this from happening, but they're not going to stop the innocent people from getting killed. People still died if you believe the story. So if you believe that Jesus and aliens saved Trump, then why didn't they save the innocent people? Why did they save the person who's not innocent? The person who's got 100 felonies and a sordid past. Very strange choice for the Lord to make. Let's move on. A few more things I want to get to, but that's a big one. The fact that we have been vindicated yet again. Predictive programming exists, and the media is forced to acknowledge it. But they call it eerie coincidence. They rule out the possibility of scripters behind the scenes. Just like the synchro mystics say, no way it could be scripted. But as I wrote in my article, don't go down with the sinking ship. Synchro mysticism is a conspiracy theorist trap. I think it's played out. I think it's fair to ask the question, is synchro mysticism dead as an explanation? And it absolutely is. Unless you can find the god of predictive programming who makes cameos and inserts his own propaganda messaging, who weirdly has a left-leaning bias. Unless you have that, it doesn't weigh against the evidence of pre-scripted news media. Here's Governor Gretchen. Who would want to babysit that? Isn't that the one that they were trying to kidnap? But anyway, here she is, sitting in front of her camera, live streaming, and behind her it has the numbers 8645. What does that mean? 8645, shoot the president. It's been noted. The term kayfabe, which the caller Lynn mentioned, was coined in the 20th century. It's Carney code for be fake. So be fake. So it's sort of similar to Pig Latin, but yeah, our news media is kayfabe. Now, here's an example of 9/11 predictive programming on World Wrestling Entertainment from 1989.
Style, the Slickster, Akeem, the African Dream, and a big boss man. Gentlemen, is this the match you wanted all along, or are you going to continue your terrorist attacks on the mega powers and the defenseless Elizabeth? What do you want?
Oh yeah, we are anxiously awaiting the presents, and they're just about on their way now.
So they're bringing out the Twin Towers. The Big Boss Man and some other guy, they call themselves the Twin Towers. And they go on ranting about how they're going to demolish the Twin Towers. And it's Hulk Hogan doing this. So consider his role at the DNC just now, and how he said enough is enough when they shoot the president, which is right off the Illuminati playing card. He talked about blading without directly mentioning it. But yeah, here he is engaging in some 9/11 programming for the sheeple.
And Randy Savage, the lovely Elizabeth, 3 people working as one with one goal in mind, to defeat, or should I say demolish, the Twin Towers. Hulk Hogan, you talked about the Triangle of Love. Jesse Ventura says there's a problem.
So demolish the Twin Towers, but now this is all coded language. If you listen to them speak here, it's coded language.
Gene, you get right to the heart of the matter with that question, brother. It's the love, man, that's going to supercharge the mega powers and tear down the Twin Towers.
This man, what were your thoughts then?
Oh, yeah, Mean Gene, I can still feel the pain when that cold steel bit into Miss Elizabeth's wrist right there. And when her...
Sorry for the TikTok ominous music. It's like obligatory ominous music on any conspiracy video. They just add it. It's terrible. There's also some other stuff going on. At the end of the Trump speech, there was an opera song that was played that is from the Sum of All Fears, which is mentioned in Q Drops. And the song references in this opera that none shall sleep, referring to some kind of revenge or execution scenario. So the Sum of All Fears is symbolic in the Quniverse. It's Tom Clancy, which predicted 9/11, predicted a number of things. But let me go ahead and play this. This is the ending music. Oh, no, I can't play it. I'm blocked by Jim Stewartson. We talked about the drone over the rally. Some people have noticed that the people behind Trump act weird, like they're signaling to the shooter. No, they're signaling to each other, if anything, because they're all actors. I've compared the Three Stooges like Secret Service agents to the Beastie Boys in the Sabotage video, where they're pretending to be Secret Service, and it looks about right. But today we spend a lot of time breaking down the entire premise behind synchromysticism and making the case that it's a bad explanation and we should move on from it because it's a waste of bandwidth and time if it's not the right answer, and moreover, if it conceals the program. It buries the metascript. It eliminates human agency and the culprits. I made this analogy before that to argue for synchromysticism is almost the same thing as saying that gremlins do computer hacking because it's too complicated for humans. If we all accepted that, hacking would never be punished. And in the same way, by arguing for a third party involved in media that's not man, it kind of takes your eyes off of who's really behind everything. And what we have been doing in our research is discerning who's behind it. We've correlated directors with specific psyops. James Cameron obviously had a role in 9/11, faked the Rodney King beating. I think Spike Lee did the Derek Western chauvinism, kneeling on Floyd. Jordan Peele did the Jordan Neely subway psyop. And we have many, many more examples of what we consider to be metascriptors. And speaking of metascripts, today is the 55th anniversary of the moon landing hoax. This is a story being told across multiple generations. It's totally fake, but that doesn't matter. The history books report it as true and real, and that's what ends up making the final cut. And here's a great meme. If they can fake a plane crash, they can fake an ear gash. Fakeability is one of our strong points here when we talk about how to argue in favor of suspending judgment until we have more information, because we have to include what we know as fakeable. What is in the realm of fakeability? Not just the realm of possibility, which is what they generally mess with, but what is fakeable? Well, you could fake an insurrection. You can fake headshots. You can fake mass shootings. You could fake planes crashing into buildings. Sky's the limit. But the real question is scale. What can you fake at scale? Yeah, you could fake panda bears and gorillas, but not at scale. But the scale of fakery possible on the world stage includes things like bombing a marathon. How many actors do you need? And just to give you another idea of just how I think capable they are of faking things is recently there were 900 casualties, simulated casualties in Berlin as part of that Euro 2024 drill, where they had 900 people faking like they were part of a mass casualty event. Okay, we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. Appreciate the support. Lord Dorkington supported us on Ko-Fi. Someone else bought a book. Books are going out Monday morning. A lot of people are picking up on, I didn't know what Lynn said. I didn't hear about that, about how a large percentage of Democrats are willing, or lefties, are calling it staged. In a way, that's progress. But I see a lot of people going into the nuance here. And interestingly, what Lyle Coyote found is that on the Machete movie we've referenced, where the senator played by Robert De Niro's Donald Trump, and he gets shot while he makes an anti-immigrant remark, just like Trump did. We made all these connections already. Well, he's looking at the watch that you see in the movie when they're about to do the shooting, and it's at 106. 106, January 6. 1.6 million rounds prompted the Waco raid. 1.6 is a huge code for the right. And didn't J.D. Vance say that he was going to, he wants to abolish the ATF. So the ATF is one of these organizations that the right nationalists see as one of their main enemies because of Waco. And Waco is really where you have the genesis of the gun grab narrative, and the anti-gun agenda really starts at Waco. Not a coincidence that Trump kicked off his campaign in Waco. And speaking of programming, Netflix releases Waco, American Apocalypse. The note at the end calls it the final battle. Speaking of fakeability, they can fake unicorns. It's called the Magdeburg unicorn. This is considered to be one of the worst fossil reconstructions in human history. It's a rhinoceros with the tusk of a narwhal, and this was actually presented as something that once lived, and people believed it. People believe in these funny things. People believe in dinosaurs. But one of the fundamental points we make here is that there's a major qualitative difference between believing something and knowing it. And we here foster a culture of disbelief. We're informed non-believers. We see no reason to believe in stuff that we know is, well, fake. And rather than just defaulting because we can't simply replace it with whatever's behind it, because sometimes, for example, you may not know what the truth is right away. So you have to be comfortable saying, I don't know, which is better than saying, I know because I trust what's on the screen. And again, the screen is what makes liars out of everybody, false witnesses out of everyone. All right, this is Auto Hoaxology by Symbia. I'll put a link below. Thanks for the comments and calls. And again, we'll continue this tomorrow.
I don't believe in chemtrails, I don't live in Truthville. Just because you saw it on the screen doesn't make it real. I don't take the red pill, I don't take the blue pill. I just choose to follow my dreams, auto hoax and chill. I stepped off the world stage and I moved away from all the fake outrage and the hearsay. And I don't give the time of day to those that naysay, because they got a bad case of the mind day. I stepped away from the game entirely, I won't be caught up in their lame dichotomy. I've stepped away from the cage entirely, I'm free today and my mind's been set by reading out of hoaxology, out of the control system finally. I know where to go if you follow me, cause I've been reading out of hoaxology. Nothing can bother me, out of hoaxology. Won't put the screen before it's blasphemy. I won't become another mind war casualty. I came up out the realm of possibility to take the helm of this reality. Cause I've been chillin' reading out of hoaxology, rejecting all the expectations of the auto-believer, to become a new creation on the raft of receivers. Standing on the sword of truth, I stab the backs of deceivers, demanding burdens further proof from all the hacks and believers. I stepped away from the game entirely, I won't be caught up in the lame dichotomy. I stepped away from the cage entirely, I'm free today and my mind's been set by reading auto hoaxology, out of the control system finally. I know where to go if you follow me, cause I've been reading auto hoaxology. Nothing can bother me, auto hoaxology. Won't put the screen before it's blasphemy. I won't become another mind war casualty. I came up out the realm of possibility to take the helm of this reality. Cause I've been chillin' reading auto hoaxology, suspending all the judgment, you won't get a reaction. Won't defend it, I won't budge until I get all the facts in. I won't argue with the bots about the next current thing, crying over the fake bodies like a bitter death clinger.